بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا صدق الله العظيم.
وسنحرص خلال المرحلة القادمة من عمر نهضتنا المتجددة للانتقال بالأداء الحكومي من مستوى الحلول الاضطرارية إلى مستوى آخر أكثر ديمومة يتم فيه إرساء مجموعة من الحلول الشاملة التي تضع النمو الاقتصادي والاستدامة المالية ورفاهية المجتمع في أول سلمها.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and valued colleagues, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the IIA Oman Summit 2024. My name is Ismail Zijjali, and my colleague Amir Al-Zijjali will be your masters of ceremony for the next 2 days.
As we gather here today, we're not just participants in another conference, but pioneers and leaders of change. We stand at the edge of a transformative era of internal auditing, driven by the ambitious Internal Audit Vision 2035, as well put by the President of IIA and CEO of IIA, Mr. Anthony Pugliese, who's sitting here among us today. He once said, and I quote, "We must transform now or risk becoming irrelevant by 2035, unquote.
This vision aims to revolutionize our profession, integrating cutting-edge technologies, fostering deeper stakeholder engagements, and drive unparalleled excellence in governance, risk management like never before. Together, in this summit today, we will embark on a journey into the future of internal auditing, navigating unique and trending areas that are redefining our field, indulging into areas like ESG principles, enhancing business continuity, to setting new standards in ethical excellence in everything we do, and many more.
But before we move on, your safety is our top priority. So in order to make sure that we are aware of the safety protocols, and during the summit, we will start with an HSE induction video.
Dear guest, welcome to Kempinski, Muscat. We'll be conducting a short health and safety briefing. When the smoke detectors in this room detect any smoke, the fire system will automatically activate. When you hear the emergency evacuation alarm, please stay calm and do not panic and leave to the nearest emergency exit, as the emergency exit in the ballroom are all wooden doors marked with the escape sign. Upon exiting the ballroom, make your way to the emergency glass door by pushing outward. Then you should go directly to the main assembly point to the right of the ballroom. The alarm often stops sounding before it's safe, so no one should re-enter the building until instructed.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to dive into inspiring discussions, hands-on insights, and forward-thinking strategies that will empower each one of us to lead this transformation and shape the future of internal audit successfully. Without further ado, let's commence the first agenda of the day.
It's our pleasure to introduce a visionary leader and an embodiment of our shared aspirations to give the welcoming speech and share his insight of the internal audit landscape in Oman 2024. Please join me in welcoming to the stage our esteemed Board Chairman of IIA Oman Chapter and Chief Executive Audit Executive of Omnvest, Munir Al-Mughairi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Your Excellency, Sheikh Abdullah Salmi, Executive President, Financial Service Authority, Your Excellency, IIA Global and Regional Representatives, Chief Executive Officers, Chief Audit Executives, Internal Auditors, and our esteemed guests. Good morning and welcome to the IIA Oman Summit. It is an honor to open this esteemed summit of dedicated professional it's an honor to open this esteemed gathering of dedicated professional under the patronage of the Financial Service Authority. Internal auditing is more crucial than ever. With rapid change, we must not only assess controls, but also drive innovation, provide strategic insights, and uphold integrity. This summit is a platform to learn, share, and collaborate with each other. Our theme, Innovating Internal Audit Strategic for Success, highlights the need for internal audit to embrace innovation and adapt the evolving organizational needs. By leveraging technology and data analytics, we can enhance efficiency, effectiveness, and impact. In this summit, we'll be revealing the outcome of Oman Internal Audit Pulse Survey 2024, which will highlight the landscape of internal auditing in Oman and provide stakeholders the insights on emerging challenges and opportunities. We will also be discussing topical areas such as AI implementations in the internal audit. Before we delve into the insightful sessions, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to our sponsors for their generous support. Their commitment to the advancement of internal auditing has made this summit possible. We appreciate their partnership and supporting internal audit professions. Let's use this opportunity to strengthen our practices and enhance trust and transparency. I'm also glad to announce that we have a record audience of 300 participants today, where we have expected less than this number, and those are coming from all public and private sectors and from multinationalities. We have esteemed speakers from around the world who will enrich you with their diverse knowledge and experience. Thank you all who made this summit possible, and thank you for joining us. I wish you an inspiring and productive summit. So while I'm here, I will start with giving the outcome of the IIA Internal Audit Pulse Survey. It is a survey that we do on every 2 years. This year, we have done our survey in collaboration with PwC. I would like to take this opportunity to thank PwC team for their support in supporting us in finalizing the survey. So the survey, as I said, we do it once every 2 years, and it gives us a very good insight about the internal audit landscape. The survey has been issued, and it was circulated to the chief audit executives, and the outcome of the survey has actually looked into the structure of the internal audit function, the approach, how internal audit function look at the risk, how the internal audit functions also use the technology, and the responses of the internal audit on addressing the emerging topics in internal audit. In terms of the demographic presentations coming from the respondents, so we could see here 42% of the respondents coming from listed company, 37% coming from government entities, and those government entities coming mainly from OIA. Also, we see professional services also have contributed to the survey, and unlisted company as AOC companies represent 11%. 42% of the respondents and the organizations have a gross annual revenue of more than 100 million, and then 36% is between 10 to 99 million. When it comes to the qualifications, the respondents that have responded, you could see here the majority have CIA and CISA. They represent almost 70% of the respondents. But also you could see also here that others have more than the internal audit required qualifications. We see some have CPA, ACCA, which is a very good trend for the internal audit professions. Nowadays, we don't want only internal auditor who have only the CIA and the internal control requirement. Also, you have to be very relevant to the industry and have the relevant qualifications for that. One thing that I just want to highlight here also, when it comes to the CIA, according to our records, we have almost 114 CIA registered here in Oman, CIA qualified. Out of this, 41 candidates are Omanis. We really need to work hard to really advance the qualifications here in Oman, and we'll be working hard in offering the CIA certificate in Oman, and we will also continue on this. So when it comes to the key findings that we are seeing here, when it comes to the structure of the internal audit department, you could see here the majority of the internal audit department are in-house, which is very good. So almost 90%, 95% are done in-house, only 5% is being outsourced. Those are actually done in-house. They are either outsourced or co-sourced, or they've done entirely within the in-house internal audit department. But it's a very good news that we see in-house internal audit department is really the common thing here in Oman. When it comes comparing this to last 2 years, we did this in 2022, it was 94% of the entities have in-house internal audit department. When it comes to the competencies and the proficiency level of the internal auditors, you could see there most of the respondents have a high proficiency and expertise in internal audit related and the control, but less into the specialized skills. What does that mean? Also for us, that means the internal auditors, as again, we keep emphasizing on this, the internal auditors must be really relevant to the industry, and they need to get more different proficiency in the relevant industry. We also delve into what is the reason why the internal auditors have restrictions in the required skill sets. And the respondent highlighted few root causes for this. The majority are related to the financial part, could be salary limitations, and also could be related to the Omanization and the number of qualified Omani available in the market to be part of that team. It's something that we really need to work hard on it, trying to bring more people into the professions and to the internal audit. Omanization level, it's very good news that we have almost 84% of the people who work in internal audit are Omanis. 97 of the functions report to the audit committee. This is also a good indication that our governance and the independence, when it comes to appearance, it is yes, it is there. So there is a very good structure, there is a very good understanding where internal audit should be positioned. One of the questions that we ask is related to the external quality assurance, which is a very important check on how the internal audit function is actually doing their work. 63% of the respondents said they have conducted external quality assessment. 37 said they have not conducted external quality assessment. 63% of those who have conducted quality assessment are mainly coming from listed company, which is also very good. And that means also the regulatory framework and requirement is really working effectively and making sure that others are doing the external quality assessment. But also we are not seeing this requirement applicable to the listed company. Although it is a requirement for the listed company, but also we have SAOC company, which is Arnold listed, they are also doing external quality assessment. That means also we have a very good understanding here on what is it required and how the external quality assessment should be conducted. And it gives us very good comfort, and it gives to our stakeholders, we have people coming as CEOs, it gives us very good indication that our internal audit professions is actually taken into consideration the external quality assessment required and gives them the comfort how it is done. However, one thing that we have noticed that majority of the external quality assessment is focusing on the conformance only, on the conformance of the internal audit standards. We should go beyond this, how that value addition is also taken into considerations when we do the external quality assessment, the improvement required within the internal audit. One of the things which is a very good trend that we are seeing here in Oman, there is a separate function in charge of the quality assurance within the internal audit department. So 45% of the respondents said yes, in their internal audit they have a separate functions for quality assurance. This is a very good indication. However, we expect this to see in large businesses or large internal audit functions, like banking sectors or wherever the team is really big. But it's a very good trend. It's a very good indication, and we will see this more and more as the organization grows. When it comes to the reporting to the secretary of the audit committee, I think the majority of the chief audit are there, the audit committee secretary, which is a very good indication also that the internal auditors are positioned well within the governance structure. When it comes to the value addition, the majority of the chief audit that have been surveyed believe that they really do add value, or they are perceived to be adding value, which is also very good indications for us. Where are they adding value? They are adding value on different areas. Mainly we speak about enhancing organizational structures, trying to prevent fraud, cost saving, improving operational efficiency, strategic alignment. Now, there are other areas where the value addition can be enhanced. However, I think one thing very critical here is the integration of internal audit within the business. It is a formula where both the internal audit and the management need to work all together to really maximize the value that comes from the internal audit. There are areas where internal audit can add more value, but in order for us to do this, we need to have strong positioning of the IIA function, which is very important. When we speak about independence, independence is not only in terms of appearance, it's in substance and appearance as well, and in forms. So this is also areas where we require the chief audits and the management to work closely together and see how they can really position themselves in a manner that really they make them respected and also really add value to the business. When it comes to the risk assessment, so the survey asked the chief audit what risks you are covering the most, what risk you are covering the least. We see here the financial risk is the highly covered risk, which is also relevant to the business, but the least one also is covered is the organizational culture. As we say, the organization culture is a soft control, and that soft control require the internal auditor really to be responsible in assessing everything in the organizations in a professional manner. So you can see that there is a strong focus by internal audit on financial and operational risk. When it comes to the skill set, yes, we think the skill set required within the internal audit department really is aligned with the business requirement. We see also there is, in the middle here, you see technology risk. There is less coverage of risk available competencies in the technology. So it's an area where the internal auditors and the internal audit department really to work on making sure they have this required skill sets. Cybersecurity and technology is very important for any organizations. And it has been even rated the top risk from Orsage. IIA Global also in their risk in focus speaks about cybersecurity as the top risk. So this is an area that really need to be looked at by the internal auditors. Last number 5 is quarter of the respondents say believe that they don't need to do anything with the organizational culture. I think this is a misconception. We are, as an internal auditor, we have a very big role in trying to assess the organizational culture. It is a soft control, and there are really insightful things that you can get from doing this review, and it has to be done in collaborations with the top executives trying to assess the culture. It shouldn't be the case, and we look forward to see more improvement, hopefully in the next 2 years, wherever we do this assessment again. This outcome reveals where internal auditors believe they should be engaged with the management. You see here, internal auditors believe they need to be more engaged at the risk identifications and assessment, and they need to be less engaged in different strategic sessions. This risk appetite, the appetite of the internal auditors to be involved only in traditional things is very prominent, and you could see that they want only to be involved in risk management, risk identification. What does this tell us? That there is an interest toward more traditional risk assessment rather than being more into strategic advisor with the business. And this is what we request here, the chief auditor really to look into this and really position themselves in a manner they really provide insightful and strategic interaction with the management. When it comes to the advisory role, we could see the trend that there is less appetite to do advisory and more into only assurance. Anthony will speak about the vision of Internal Audit 2035 and how internal auditor should do more of advisory, taking into consideration that does not compromise their independence and objectivity. This about the reporting practice, how internal auditors think or believe or currently reporting their outcome and the way they are using automations and the dashboards. Interaction within the organizations. If you see here, internal auditors are interacting more with the financial controls and the chief financial officers. And if you go up, they are less interacting with the second line of assurance, compliance and risk management. We always speak about the notion of combined assurance. There is a big area of improvement here, because if internal auditors does not talk to the second line of defense, that means we are duplicating the work. We are putting so much work into the management. The same person gets audited maybe once, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and they get tired. There is an area where we can improve in trying to coordinate with the second line of defense. When it comes to not only the second line of defense, also who are the people that they have less interaction and more interaction. As I said, they interact more with the CFOs, less with the chief risk officer, and with the compliance. One thing that I just want to mention here when it comes to the board and the chief executive officer. The chief executive officer, there is a good interactions between the chief audit and the chief executive officer. And if the chief audit does not interact with the CEO, there is a big issue. You always need to make sure that you work closely with the CEO, you have that alignment, strategic alignment. Doesn't mean that need to be agreed, but it's your role to make sure that you are really adding value to the business. And the role also of the CEO to make sure that the internal auditors are positioned in a manner that they can also have the room to come and give their feedback and their insights into the business. When it comes to also to the risk assessment, we have seen the behavior demonstrated by internal audit. Most of the behavior demonstrated by internal audit related to they have very good communication skills, they are reporting with impact, they have empathy. However, on the other side, internal auditors are not really challenging senior management on strategic matters and complex change. Referring to the internal audit standards, So we say that the internal audit standards really require the internal auditor to speak with management and to challenge management, but with honesty and professional courage. This is very important. Your role to make sure that you are effective, you are really adding value to the business. You need to have discussions with the senior management. Ask challenging questions, very good questions, so then people can take an informed decisions. This speaks about how agile is the internal audit. So during the year, how many times you are changing the audit plan. The outcome of this is very good. It seems that the internal auditors are adapting to the change as we go during the year. Not necessarily I have to wait for the end of the year and then make that change. So it's a very good indication. Cybersecurity, it's been outsourced. The 44% has been outsourced to a consultant. However, also we see there 18%, they have experts in cybersecurity within the internal audit department. This is also an area, it can be further research. We don't have the answer. It could be because this is a small business, maybe does not justify recruiting somebody who has a cybersecurity expertise. And there is no size fit all, so it depends. However, the outcome says 44% has been outsourced. This is related to the culture part. Why internal auditors are not doing or they are not conducting cultural audit? Mainly is related to their capability. You could see the 53% is about the capability and maturity of the existing team, because it requires special skill sets within the internal audit team. Technology and internal audit. We see investment in internal audit when it comes to the technology in data analytics, training internal audit staff, and using a management tool. The future investments, most of the respondents say they will be investing in AI and investigation tools related to internal audit and the way that it helps them in doing their work. Emerging topics, artificial intelligence. 55% of the respondents say they are not using AI, and 45% they say they are using AI. And what we see here in the market, 45% of the AI being used in Oman, mainly using ChatGPT in trying to support them in getting some internal control things or inquiries addressing their insight. When it comes to the internal audit plan, 14% of the respondents believe or they have factored the AI risk part of their audit plan. The others, 86%, they have not covered or planned to audit this one. It's something that is coming. The role of internal audit when it comes to the AI is trying to make sure that the governance of the AI and the risk associated with the AI and giving that insight to management. One of the emerging topics is that the new IIA global standards that came into effect, and it will be January, it will be the effective date. So the respondents believe that it will have less impact on their operations and into the organizations, which means that the internal audit profession here in Oman is ready, and they take into consideration the IIA standards, part of their mandate, and they are implementing their work in line with IIA global standards. This is why you see less impact. People are anticipating to have less impact. Only 23% they believe that there is a major impact is going to on their operations. And this could be from government entity, could be from a listed company. Now, for the closing remarks, we have been talking about all of those challenges, and we see there are opportunities. And it is the role of everyone in this room, from all aspects, to make sure that the outcome of the survey is taken into considerations in our daily operations. If we are looking into what needs to be done, I think in-house available skill sets, yes, it is aligned with the internal audit mandate. However, we see there is an area of improvement where internal auditors need to make sure that they are relevant to the industry, they have the required skill sets to serve the business and to really add value, not only to look into control and the governance, but also to make sure that the relevant experience related to that industry is being really supported by giving that insight to the management and the board. We could see also internal audit coverage. Internal audit coverage is only focusing on specific things, which is also very good. It also seems that, or it's coming really predominant, that risk assessment is the basis for establishing an internal audit plan. However, because of the risk outcome and because of some restriction that we are seeing, the challenges either related to the financial things, related to the scarcity of the skill sets available here in Oman, it's an area that needs to be looked into. We look at the assurance activity, combined assurance. It's really an area where we all need to take into consideration. Combined assurance is going to save the energy. It's going to save the business from duplicating the efforts. It also allows us as internal auditor really to focus on the critical things and not only to repeat and duplicate the work of others. We see stakeholders engagement. Stakeholders engagement mainly with the management, with the second line of defense also is coming very prominent, and with everybody in the organization that can support them in implementing their work. The last thing, which is the IIA response to change. We are seeing there the approach that of the internal auditors in trying to address the changes during the year is extremely good. They are making the changes throughout the year, and they are not waiting for their audit plan to be again reviewed and approved by the board. This is the main things that we just wanted to highlight to you about the IIA survey. I will leave you with this outcome, and we will be issuing the report soon, inshallah, with our team, PwC. Again, I want to thank PwC team for their effort in supporting us in conducting this survey and in finalizing the survey. Thank you. Since we are all gathering here, we would like to announce, in collaboration with FSA, we are introducing the Internal Audit Leading Practice Award. So this is an award to really motivate all those who work in internal audit to really improve their operations, really to add value to the business, improve their status within the business. There are some criteria that's going to be launched very soon, inshallah. I would like again to emphasize and thank Financial Service Authority for their continuous effort and collaboration with IIA Oman. More information will be coming, inshallah, soon, but this is the launch of the survey, of the award, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, Munir, for sharing your valuable insights. We are truly grateful for your dedication towards continuously improving the internal audit landscape in Oman. And of course, for announcing the Leading Internal Audit Practice Award, a prestigious recognition of excellence. To all our attendees, we wish you all the best in the journey towards achieving this distinguished honor. May this award inspire all of us to continue striving for excellence. Thank you once again, Munir.
Now, it's our honor to introduce keynote speaker of the day, a strategic leader with over 30 years of experience, who have pioneered innovative educational initiatives aimed at enhancing members' professional growth, overseen internal audit department at the major organizations, and reshaped cultural norms, including diversity, equality, and inclusion. This speaker is leading the direction toward the Internal Audit Vision 2035. Dear all, please join me in welcoming Mr. Anthony Pugliese, President and CEO of the IIA Global.
Good morning, everybody. I would be remiss in not starting off in saying that I've had the opportunity, along with our immediate past chair of our global board, Sally Ann Pitt, to spend 2 days seeing this beautiful country. 2 days was not enough, but it certainly was enough to whet our appetite to be back. So thank you to everyone that arranged that. It was really remarkable. I'm also excited to be able to spend time with you today to discuss the results of a very groundbreaking research project that we started over a year and a half ago, and the results have been made available since July. But really, the research was aimed at helping IIA understand how to develop our global strategic plan. And in that plan, we were looking at a profession that was under significant change that was occurring constantly. And we really needed to get an understanding of where our members and other members of the profession and stakeholders thought the profession was headed. And it's not just internal audit that's going through significant change. It's really every learned profession around the world, whether we're in engineering or medicine or the legal profession, the external audit profession. Everybody's trying to understand what's happening and how the current market is changing, what their members do and what those professions do. So this is internal audit's slice of that pie. So let me give you an idea of what our research showed us. So I'll describe a little bit about how we did the research and how global it was, and also go over one by one the 5 recommendations that we have for the profession that IIA will be working very hard to make sure happen. And then we have one final slide at the end that I think is very encouraging. It's where we asked every respondent to tell us what they thought the profession would be in a couple of words by the time we were in the year 2035, so a decade from now. So let me jump into it, and I have 30 minutes, well I guess I have less now, to go over a whole lot of data. So if I'm flying through it, please know there's a copy of this presentation if you should want it that we'll gladly make available. So the research itself, we needed 5,000 people to respond to our research in order to make it statistically valid so we could extrapolate results. And I'm happy to say we had 7,300 people respond from around the world. And it was really, really interesting that the responses did not really differ significantly as we go region to region around the world. They were basically the same. Certain things moved up or down 1 point or so, but not very much. So you can see 7,300 people responded. We had 155 different countries represented in the study in terms of respondents. 20% of the respondents were stakeholders, 80% were internal auditors, members of the profession. And as we look closer at those results, in that 80%, I will tell you that we had probably 12 to 15 years of experience in each of the respondents on average, and most of the respondents were chief audit executives. So not that that makes the results more profound, but they were results that were given by people that are most experienced and most familiar with the profession. So that was exciting. And I guess the punchline slide, as we talk about change, the first question we really wanted to know is everyone agreeing that there is going to be change occurring in the profession? And we're very happy to see that 56% think that we will have a very different profession by the time 2035 rolls around. Another 33% thought we would see a moderately different profession, so one that's different, not as much as the 56%, and only 9% didn't think it would be that different than it is now. And there's probably some reasons for that, but we're going to be doing a lot more research because of the results from this research. So we're excited about all the other holes we'll be able to fill in as we move along. So as we think about the recommendations, I'm going to cover each one of these, but I'll go over them quickly. The first one is we have to shift the perception of what internal audit is and what internal audit does as a profession. We have to make sure that as a profession we embrace technology. And I know we've been talking about that for a long time, but this time it's really become clearer that in a world of AI and everything else that's happening, our need to embrace technology is more and more urgent. And not just because we need to do it to do our jobs, but because there's an expectation from stakeholders that we do that. We also need to think about expanding the scope of what we do beyond the traditional. And based on Munir's slide, it looks like a lot of Oman is already there in terms of not just focusing on compliance or internal controls over financial reporting, but thinking about the risks that are truly important to an organization's board of directors, audit committee, and senior management, and other stakeholders, and making sure we incorporate those into our audit plans. Fourth recommendation is to be sure that we connect the work of an internal audit plan to the strategy of an organization. And then finally, probably the one I'm really excited about, is we have to grow our talent pipeline around the world. And we have varying degrees of how successful IIA has been around the world, But generally speaking, we're far behind where we want to be in terms of bringing new talent into the profession. Whether they have accounting backgrounds, IT backgrounds, engineering backgrounds, you name it, we need to do more in that area, or we're not going to have enough people or the right skill sets. So I'll talk now about the first recommendation, shifting current perceptions. And I'll preface it by saying almost all the data we've received on how to change perception is to become strategic advisors and catalysts for change. Being seen as strategic advisors. I know in the past we called that trusted advisors, but we were really interested in the fact that most of our members did not come back with that word. It was strategic, which was appealing. I mean, I think that is the way we need to position ourselves. And so as we think about how to position ourselves in this positive way, we have to pause and think, what exactly are the challenges we're facing as a profession as seen through the eyes of our stakeholders and our members and other members of the profession? And by far, number one is that we are misunderstood and undervalued. And that probably resonates with a lot of people, perhaps less so in Oman. But as we go around the world, there's just a lack of understanding of what internal audit does. We also need more support from leadership and stakeholders, people asking us to do things that we're capable of doing and then relying on it. Lacking the needed skill sets as the world keeps changing, that's going to probably be on there for a long time. Expanding the expectations from leadership and stakeholders becomes very key. That's where we as a profession make sure what we do is understood and valued. And then finally, finding the right balance between assurance and advisory services. Also, Munir touched on that as well. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that. But as we think about challenges, what then are the perceptions that people have? When we just mention internal audit, what is sort of the immediate response we get? Some of these are positive. Some of things are maybe not as positive. And certainly there are some things missing that we would like to see in the perceptions category. So number one, we're seen as a compliance-only function. We're the people that make sure laws and regulations are followed. That's not untrue, but that's not all we do. We're also seen as independent. That's great. But look at number three. We're seen as police on the left-hand side. That is probably not surprising to a lot of people, but it doesn't really bring us in the direction we want to be in terms of being seen as strategic advisors. I don't know about in Oman, but in the United States, we don't typically go to the police for advice. Typically, you don't want to be in trouble or anywhere near police at any given time. So we have to work on that because that makes us a very punitive almost function to a lot of people. And there are other positive things here, but what I note that's missing the most is we're not seen as IT savvy. There's a missing gap that we know how to use technology and that we will use technology in what we do and that we will know how to understand the risks technology and opportunities that technology brings to an organization, the companies we work for. So it's important to think about those perceptions and how we need to change them. So also, positively, 51% believe internal audit is viewed as independent. That's very positive. It's higher than I thought. And not to be negative, but that means 49% of stakeholders don't think of us as independent. So you have to see the flip side of that as well. That's a big audience that we have to educate on what independence means and why it's so critical, particularly as we move into doing more and more advisory work. So the role of the IIA, I'm going to mention under each of these recommendations just quickly some of the things that we believe we're doing now that will significantly enhance and make these recommendations come to pass, knowing that this list is not all-encompassing. There's a lot more that we need to be doing. So as we think about perceptions and how we change them, some things that we're doing to help with that right now, we as a profession, not just IIA Global, is we do have our new standards and a commitment to continue evolving them as the market in the business environment mandates that. Not looking at them in a prospective way, but looking at them in a forward way. Thinking of them, perspective, moving forward. How do we make sure the standards are always meeting the needs of the market? We know that we have to produce actionable research, and not just research. Research can be very academic in nature. So what we've been really striving to do is to make our research something members can put their hands on and actually do something with quickly. Advocating for the profession globally, advocacy to me and to our global board is IIA being present when our profession is being discussed or debated, and also being present when our profession isn't being discussed but should be. So that's a daunting role, but what it does is it allows us to carry the message about what we do to the audiences that we think are most critical to the future of the profession and the success of the profession. And then lastly, a commitment to provide the best tools and resources to make sure members can step up to the challenges and opportunities that are presented to them. So these are all things that we're working on. And just quickly on the standards, I think we've probably had enough review of the standards probably in the last year. They go live in January if you're not ready. But the change in the standards, what really does is it speaks to the kind of communications we want to have with our boards and audit committees and management. And it really changes and raises the bar, maybe not demonstrably for some people, but in some parts of the world significantly raises the bar on how we interact and expectations of setting with the audit committee and board of directors. And it also starts to guide more effectively than standards in the past the way we do assurance and advisory services. So a lot there, and hopefully the intuitive way that standards were designed also lends itself to being something that's more easily understood by third parties when they pick them up and read them. Just kind of go around the wheel there. If you want to understand exactly what performing means, you can dive right in. We also know that our new topical requirements are part of performing internal audit work. And topical requirements, it's not a venue for us getting deep into this, our new requirements should a chief audit executive decide to perform an assurance report on certain areas that we believe presents volatile risk and greater risk to the profession if not done reasonably consistently around the world. So most mature economies are not going to have an issue with topical requirements, but it will raise the bar in parts of the world perhaps where cyber is not something the profession has a lot of experience with, or maybe we have members that don't know how to approach the task. But we know that these topics are becoming more important to stakeholders than they've ever been before. So minimum levels of conformance around these areas. And we believe that'll have a trickle effect of improving the profession. Global advocacy is something that certainly IIA Global does, but it's something that each and every one of our 117 affiliates around the world engage in under sort of the supervision of IIA Global to make sure that the things that we need to be doing are done. And this is just some examples of some of the areas that we've dived into in the last 4 years. And you'll notice that some of these things, like developing a report on global corporate governance codes, is sort of the beginning stages of how we can go country by country and region by region around the world to make sure corporate governance codes properly mention, or mention at all, that internal audit is a part of proper governance in an organization. So unfortunately, that's not the case everywhere. So a lot more happening. And then the first one, we call it the Global Public Policy Position Paper, and we realize that's a mouthful, so we say GP4. GP4 is the first time we've produced guidance so that all 117 organizations under the IIA banner are looking at how to approach governments and other influential bodies with the same message, so that we aren't getting splintered as we go around the world and people have different approaches. That helps to cement that in a different way. So advocacy is very important to changing the future of the profession, the perceptions of the profession. And it's one of those things we'll never be done with, but could have profound impacts in a positive way. So embracing technology is the second recommendation, and I know this is one that we've discussed many, many times, and it was in Munir's report as well. So starting off, the good news is that all members, for the most part, every one of these statistics on here is positive, realize the importance of technology and what it can do for the profession and for the work that they do every day. There's no doubting that that's well understood. So I won't go into each one of these, but you can look at the 97, 96 across the screen and get an idea that members and stakeholders understand why we need to be using technology. However, the actual use of technology is not exactly in line with those numbers. So if you look on this chart, the number one technology that's used inside of internal audit teams around the world is audit management platforms, which isn't a surprise. But some areas of improvement, if you look at artificial intelligence, the green represents those internal audit teams that are either using AI in the work that they do, or they're looking at the AI usage of the companies they work for. And that percentage is very, very low compared to the amount of AI activity occurring in the market. You'll see on the next slide, 77% of companies globally, I'm sure that number is understated, is somehow investing heavily in the use of AI to significantly change business processes, but only 7% of our members are actively engaged in that change. So something we see as an opportunity. And you can see the rest of these, they kind of go up and down, but nothing in the green is really very substantively high. So an opportunity for us. And by the way, you will see those same results, I'm confident, if we looked at our cousins in the external audit profession as well. So it's not just like this is centered around us. It's on every profession, on adapting change this quickly. So we also know that I mentioned 77% of businesses globally are using AI. And I think one of the things that's often missed is that AI is not occurring in a way, when it's implemented in organizations, that make it a standalone, sort of separate risk. It affects almost every other business process in an organization. So if you look in here and you think about customer service as the one example I'll use, customer service, if you call into an organization, you get on the phone with a chatbot, and they're becoming better and better. But what they're also doing is they're reaching more extensively and more pervasively into an organization's IT platforms and pulling data, probably not always completely in alignment with laws and regulations about how personally identifiable information can be used. But yet, it's being done. So it's more than just AI. It presents risk across almost all other platforms that AI uses in doing its job. So an opportunity. We also know that right now AI is becoming very, very compliance focused because there are laws and regulations around the world that are popping up. This is just a sampling. And this was done 2 months ago. I would probably venture to say that there's a lot more on here than there was before. But even massive laws, massive changes in the EU AI Act is probably the most profound AI act of its kind in the world, will probably produce model legislation for other countries as they figure out how to do this. It's actually very well written. It's just a lot more work in order to classify systems and or compliance with the AI Act. So if you're not already focused on it, it is a compliance risk as much as it is an operational and strategic risk. If you have an opportunity, the IIA has an AI center, an AI knowledge center on our website that's available to all members, regardless of where you are in the world. It's got tools and opportunities. We have an AI audit framework that was developed by a task force that had some very significant members from around the world, including Aramco, Meta. A lot of organizations that are actively using AI helped us develop it, and we're going to keep that refreshed. But if you have the time, this is a great resource to all members. The third area, expanding the scope of the work that we do. We've mentioned this many times, but the nature of what internal audit does is changing, but it isn't changing everywhere around the world. So we have to think about, what are management, audit committees, and boards worried about? This is what we do now as a profession. The areas on the left of this slide, the top area in audit scope now, on the left, 47% of internal audit plans cover IT, which means 53% of internal audit plans do not cover IT. And that doesn't mean they cover all areas of risk. And I don't think this for a minute that this is because our members don't want to be doing that work. I think it's going back to the first slide about not having the resources that they need, being undervalued perhaps by management and boards in the work that they do. We'd probably see that a lot higher, and also finding the people that can do the work for them. AI being an example of where it's hard to find the right skill sets. 84% focused in compliance, 64% in fraud, 55% on governance and culture. That's good. What's more positive is that as we move ahead, in the next 3 years, basically is what these on the right are representing, we see more and more organizations, including cybersecurity and sustainability reporting, in scope in a significant way. So that's very positive, especially since those areas are extremely important and becoming more important. Some other areas of risk, and this is from our Risk in Focus report, which is a report that's done globally. The entire Middle East and North African region participated in this report. And again, we saw very little change as we went around the world. Cyber, last year, this year, and 3 years from now, #1 risk. And what isn't quite understood in this is cyber, in combination with AI, makes it probably even more of a significant risk. Now we have AI platforms using, or cyber platforms using AI to defend infrastructure, and we have cyber criminals using AI to penetrate cyber infrastructure. So it's becoming more and more important, hence the reason we have topical requirements around the area. And if you look at some of the areas we see really rapidly moving up on the risk, on the risk chart, digital disruption of all kinds. We probably need to find a more positive connotation to that than just saying disruption. But it becomes really quickly, it goes from 5 to 4 to 2. And then look at climate change. Currently 14 as you go around the world in terms of risks that internal auditors look at. It quickly moves up to 13, but then 5. And I would imagine that as we see more and more laws, that's probably, again, understated, because most of these respondents are looking at the laws and regulations that are coming on the horizon in order to make that assumption. So other things that we need to be looking at, perhaps more then we're looking at things like regulatory compliance and fraud and risk, which are mainstays of the profession, but certainly not the only thing that we should be worrying about. So we also now know, in our new global economy, our global world, that we have to be looking at risk a little bit differently in the past. And one thing our Risks in Focus report did show us is that members are worried about the risks that I just showed you, direct pressure risks, the risks that are coming out really obviously that impact a business, whether they're financial, new regulations, business opportunities. But on the right, we're noticing that internal audit teams are becoming more and more concerned about the indirect pressures, things like politics, the results of elections, the results of regime changes, how now for the first time we're seeing political issues find their way into internal audit plans, which is appropriate because it can significantly impact an organization. Public opinion probably speaks to sustainability reporting and other metrics that the public is now focused on that they weren't before. And then social impact, becoming more and more important to the generations entering the profession now currently. So another way to look at risk than perhaps we have done in the past that helps drive us toward being seen as more value added. If you have a minute, this report is available to everybody free of charge. You don't have to be a member, you don't have to be an internal auditor. The reports are done globally. There's one done globally and then one done by each of the regions within IIA's network, including the Middle East and North Africa. So if you get a chance to download it, if you don't get this QR code, it's like front and center on our website right now at the IIA.org. So if you have a moment, I think that's been very valuable. You can get a little bit more insight into what the risks are that I mentioned. But to take cyber and ESG for just a moment and talk just a minute more, for those internal auditors that aren't looking at cyber, I think this is an important slide because it really shows how costly cybercrime has become around the world. In 2023, just last year, the final tallied number was that $8 trillion were lost to cyber criminals in 2023. That's $250,000 every second that ticks by. $9.5 trillion is the expected for 2024, and we've already exceeded that number since this report was put out, which means next year's number is probably understated. $10.5 trillion lost to cybercrime, or $330,000 every second. So if you've never been affected by cybercrime, it probably isn't wise to ignore it just because of that. It's becoming more and more pervasive and costing more and more. We also have a ton of resources around the topic of cyber. If you want to find them on our website, also available to all members. And you can see that goes out to December of this year, next month, but we have it all the way plotted out through May of next year to make sure we're keeping up with the changing environment around cyber. And of course, the topical requirements will add to that as well as the guidance associated with it. So cyber, sustainability, another way of looking at sustainability risk, this is produced by the World Economic Forum. This is actually a think tank, if you're not familiar with it, in Geneva, in Switzerland. And it is comprised of business leaders from the not-for-profit and the for-profit world, from the public sector, from government, politicians sit on the World Economic Forum in various capacities, business leaders, and they looked at risk, and this is their consolidated report, that look at all the different things in green. Those are the things that are directly related to sustainability. And look at the orange. Those are the things that are under the S in ESG. And probably some of the ones that are gray, that are technology, are under the G, or governance in ESG. Not one of these things in the top 10 risks identified by the World Economic Forum have anything to do with the economy, at least not directly, which is really interesting because for the last 40 years, almost every one of the top 10s had a lot of blue in it. Whether we were looking at inflation, recession, depression, you name it, rising interest rates, falling interest rates, those were always included, but not anymore. And also in the past, the World Economic Forum simply said climate change, and now they've broken it out into 5 categories that made the top 10. So a lot more happening on that front. And if you're in an environment or a government or a region that isn't impacted by sustainability, I guess my prediction would be it's just a matter of time before you are. And if you're a multinational organization and you do business, say, in Europe, you already are subject to regulation, even if you're not operating there significantly. So any business you do, you have to think about laws and regulations. And that's also something we have been focusing a lot of time and energy on, noting that ESG can be different in every region and every country as we go around the world, but our commitment is to keep developing the resources that our members need to do the work that they do. Under ESG, we've actually issued some ESG certificate programs to demonstrate that our members have a certain minimum level of knowledge around the sustainability reporting area. So a lot going on. If you get a chance, again, please look at our website for the ESG resources. I think you'll find them pretty valuable. Next recommendation, connecting with strategy. This is really, really important. It's making sure that we aren't operating in a vacuum, in isolation, but that the work we do is directly correlated somehow with the strategic plan or the strategy of an organization. So sometimes it's just strategic plan. Are we going to be able to do the things that we want to do? But sometimes it's the things that are strategically important to an organization, like cyber, like sustainability. So connecting with strategy is very, very important. And what we heard in this finding that I thought was really interesting is that most of our stakeholders, and perhaps this is true where we have more assurance than we do advisory work, but they see us as a function that looks at the past and then tells us how we did in the past. And then we're supposed to take those results and figure out how to use them in the future. But the inverse is really true for a lot of boards and audit committees. They're worried about the future and the things that are happening now that could affect the future. Things like what you saw in the Risk and Focus report and the other risks that were identified in this research. So that's a significant shift. That's a significant shift from what we've done. In fact, those are probably the things that would be more important. 79% believe that advisory work will expand and expect those services to become more essential to the work that internal auditors do and the expectations of boards and audit committees around the world. That's good, as long as we can pivot into providing those services quickly and effectively. CAE roles, just to demonstrate that this is already happening, which is why we probably got this input, CAE roles are really changing. And this is not an endorsement of whether it's right or wrong or what I think of it. It's simply what the market is telling us, that CAEs are becoming more and more prevalent in areas of fraud, compliance, and risk management, meaning that they directly supervise those functions now, where in the past, we had a little bit more of a purist approach where you have first line, second line, third line, but now second line functions are clearly moving under the control, the management of the chief audit executive. I think that's positive. I'm not sure how everybody feels. The only exception is financial services. Typically around the world, you see that far more regulated and separate requirements that second line be kept distinct, not meaning that won't change. And we recognize at the global board of directors level that that means our three lines model is becoming blurred. And we have to rethink it. And that's not an easy task because it isn't a absolute, like it's changing. For some organizations, it's not. We've looked at it and said, I don't know, do we have a second line A and a second line B? Like, how do we look at that? That's not what we're going to decide on. But we know that we have work to do here, and we have guidance to put out here. So that's coming. That's coming in the next year. Another thing on that, just so you know, we did look at, I think risk management was one that we weren't shocked by, but we were surprised at how many chief audit executives are managing risk. Not so surprised on compliance or fraud, but really on risk. So under Sally Ann Pitt's leadership, we have launched a committee that is examining the extent to which risk management services are occurring, how they're occurring. For example, are chief audit executives keeping risk teams separate from internal audit, or are they using the team members interchangeably between the functions? We don't know yet exactly how that's happening, but more research will be done, and there'll be recommendations made to our global board, and probably changes made at IIA and making sure that we're supporting this area of the profession that's growing very quickly. So growing our pipeline. So we know that there are two audiences under this recommendation that we have to think about. Probably the one that we can affect most quickly are the students that are learning things that make them relevant to internal audit and vice versa. It doesn't cover right now the people that make changes in their careers somewhere after they've begun in the workforce, mid-career changers. But we know that students are a primary target for us, and that a lot of students really don't know a lot about internal audit. The number one finding when we ask students, why aren't you interested in internal audit? They didn't know what it was. So a lack of awareness. That's actually positive. I'd rather hear that than hear them say, I don't like it. It doesn't sound like it's anything I want to do. But lack of awareness we can work on. We can raise awareness. There's a preference for other fields perceived as more glamorous. For example, external audit is perceived as more glamorous. I think there just needs to be some education there. External audit is great. I wouldn't call it glamorous. Misconceptions about career progression, they just don't know. How does a career happen in internal audit? What do I expect in my career journey? Some don't even know what a chief audit executive is. They've never heard of that C-suite title. Limited exposure in university, lack of mentorship, lack of internship opportunities, a lot of lack ofs about why they don't understand it. So we have our work cut out for us. Another large committee under IIA Global has been established to understand how we can do this better. We do have programs in place though that help us. We know that building out the internal audit pipeline of students, we have a lot of different things at our disposal that we can make this happen really effectively and fast. We know that we can work with service providers, the big firms that actually have the co-sourcing and outsourcing functions in their organizations. They recruit on college campuses around the world. Let's just say the big 5 firms recruit everywhere around the world for external audit. They don't tend to recruit on campuses for internal audit, which is sometimes the fastest growing line of business within those firms. So that's probably because it takes a lot to shift a global initiative within a big company like where I used to work at Deloitte. It takes a lot. They're geared toward external audit, but if we can work with them to maybe include internal audit, we have a lot of opportunity. We can partner with established organizations. For example, in the US, we've begun a project with Citi. Citi has 3,000 internal auditors in the US alone, and more as you go around the world, but they also aren't recruiting from campuses, and we want to know why. Why is that not something you want to do? Maybe it is, and we'll provide the avenue for them to do it. Internships, we know, into new generations is hugely important. Internships actually have a conversion rate of, if a student does an internship in internal audit, we see as high as 84% of those people stay in internal audit because they get to experience it. And all the positive things we say about it, they get to experience. Those that don't see it tend to not go in it because they haven't had the experience and the opportunity to understand it. So a lot of different weapons at our disposal. I think the embedding of internal audit in curriculum is probably the most powerful because that takes care of the exposure and the understanding that occurs. And maybe we start including that in maybe accounting programs, only because that might be the easiest, but it needs to be included in other programs in business schools and colleges and universities around the world. So we're excited by that. We have a lot of expectations, and we're actually looking at how we can change things. I mentioned this on internships. I won't stay on this anymore, but you can see a lot of students make decisions to stay in internal audit once they've had an internship opportunity. These are the benefits of being a student member. If anybody's interested or in here that is a student, the bar on the lower right is how you can sign up for free. It's free now around the world. Student membership has its own benefits. We don't charge anything for it, and we intend to keep growing that around the world. Some of these things like a mentorship program, grants and awards, the ability to meet our members everywhere around the world is key. So we're tapping into that and actually using the resources of our volunteer leadership around the world. Now here's our last slide. The last slide is one I found very promising because we did not delete or edit out any comments that were negative. In fact, I probably would have kept them in here because it would have given a different dimension to this, but there weren't any. When we asked our respondents to tell us in a few words, what do you think is the internal auditor of the future? Well, this is what we were told. And not only is that good news based on the words on this slide, to me it was good news because I believe half the battle sometimes is actually getting people that are enthused about the things that you want them to do. This tells me that our members are our biggest cheerleaders. Our respondents are our biggest cheerleaders for the profession, which means we have a ready-made group of people, 255,000 of them are members, that can help us do the things that this report indicates are critical to the profession of the future. Well, the profession 10 years from now. So with that, if you have a chance, please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you use LinkedIn, I only provide updates on probably all the things that you've seen on this slide, but it's been an honor to present this to you. I hope it gets everybody thinking about what we need to do. I see all these things as very, I wouldn't say easy, but they are challenges that we can rise to. They are surmountable as we move into the future. And keep paying attention to IIA because we're going to be doing a lot of things to make these things come to life. So thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Anthony, for enlightening perspectives and for guiding us through the Internal Audit Vision 2035 research and outcomes. The vision reminds us of the powerful role that we play as trusted advisors and change agents. Let's give another round of applause to Mr. Anthony. Thank you.
Now, it's our pleasure to introduce a very special part of our program today, the award distribution ceremony, where we celebrate excellence and dedication in our profession. Today, we will be recognizing our esteemed partners and sponsors and champions of the Internal Audit Awareness Month. To help us present this award, it's my pleasure to invite to the stage His Excellency Abdullah bin Salim Al-Salmi, Executive President of Financial Services Authority, joined by Munir Al-Mugheri, Board Chairman of IIA Oman Chapter.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin by honoring our esteemed partners and sponsors, whose invaluable support has made this summit possible. Starting with our strategic partner, OQ. Next, we invite our official partner, the Financial Service Authority. Representing our technology partner, please welcome Oman Tel. We now honor our gold sponsors, Oman Vest. It's you, Munir. It's you. Next, KPMG. Nema Holding. Price Waterhouse Coopers, as well known as PwC. Next, Oman LNG. Next, Transom. Walters Kluwer. Thank you to our gold partners. For our logistic partner, we invite Asyad. Finally, we recognize our silver sponsors, starting with Al-Izz Islamic Bank. Oman Arab Bank. And Polyglot Technologies. Thank you to each one of you for your incredible support and partnership. We are delighted also to honor internal audit departments that have gone above and beyond in raising the awareness and strengthening the effectiveness of internal auditing. We invite the representative to receive the Champions of Internal Audit Awareness Month Award, starting with OQ. We will play a video also of OQ's Awareness Month initiative. Okay, we'll play the video. Our next champions Oman vest. Nama holding. Oman tel. Vodafone. Authority for Public Services Regulation. Royal Oman Police. Ministry of Labor, South Sharqiyya Government. المها بتروليوم. Next, we have Oman Airports. الفار. Final champion, Phoenix. Thank you all for your dedication and commitment to advancing the field of internal audit.
Next, we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks and appreciation to our chief guests. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Sally Ann Pitt, immediate past chair of Global Board of Directors of the IIA. Anthony Pugliese, President and CEO of IIA Global. Finally, we are honored to present this Appreciation Award to Your Excellency in recognition of your exceptional contribution and unwavering support for the internal audit profession in Oman. Your visionary leadership and constant partnership has been instrumental in advancing our field. Thanks for being our guiding force and for the pursuit of our professional excellence. Mr. Abdullah bin Salim al-Salmi.
Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, we thank you for your support. We can sense the enthusiasm in the room to know more about what lies ahead. However, to maintain this energy, we'll be taking a break. This is an excellent opportunity to network and connect. Please, we'll reconvene at 11 a.m. Enjoy your break. Thank you. Dear guests, we will restart now. Please take your seats. Dear guests, we will start now. Please take your seats. Samira. Amira, can we call them in? Dear guests, please come inside. We will restart now. ما مشكلة، عشان الشيخ عبد الرحمن يستاهل. بس مع من؟ بيروح الحين. He's going. هنا 14 قصدي خلي ينادون. أفضل. Please take your seats. Dear guests, please come inside and take your seats. We'll restart now. Thank you all for returning so promptly after the break. It's great to see everyone recharged and ready to continue the discussion with energy and focus. We are delighted to introduce our next presentation, titled Best Practice Governance in Action, Strengthening the Board and Internal Audit Partnership. This session will be delivered by Jan Bladen, an experienced board member, C-suite professional, and an international speaker in corporate governance. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Jan Bladen.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm anything but an internal auditor. I'm actually a chairman. I sit on numerous boards. So what I'd like to do with you over the next 45 minutes is take you through a journey to look at internal audit through the eyes of a board member. What do we expect from you, and what are the liabilities and the risks that we take as board members, and how can you be our eyes and ears and checks and balances going forward? So the first thing I'd like to do is probably just introduce myself to you for those of you that don't know me. From my cultural background, I've now been in the Middle East for about 30 years. I was raised internationally. At the age of 18, I'd been in 11 countries with my parents, most of them across the GCC and Northern Africa. So you'll find there's a cultural affinity that I actually thoroughly love with the Middle Eastern region. I did my MBA in Lausanne many, many years ago, became the first person to be accredited with the Institute of Directors in Dubai, became the chairman of the IOD, was accredited by the International Finance Corporation and World Bank as one of their trainers of trainers in terms of corporate governance, specifically in emerging markets, Harvard Business Schools and a few other things. So there's a lot on the academic side, and I've given about 10% of my time to the Board Director Institute in the GCC, and I've probably trained or coached, I'm guessing, around 500 board members across the GCC in the last 2 years. I'm a practitioner, not an academic. I sit on various boards. I chair boards. I sit on the board of a Swiss asset management firm. The first board I ever served on many, many years ago was the board of directors or the board of governors of my old boarding school in the UK. So a lot more in terms of the hands-on, real application of being a board member. In terms of my professional background, I know we've got PricewaterhouseCoopers in the room. I was originally PW before the merger with Coopers and Lybrand. And I became the founding chief operating officer for the Financial Services Authority in Dubai, one of the key pillars to establishing the Dubai International Financial Center, or the DIFC, in Dubai. Spent about 9-10 years with them, left, wanting to spend time with my family, and within 4 weeks I'd been recruited by Abu Dhabi, and I went and spearheaded the launch of Abu Dhabi Global Market, or Abu Dhabi's International Financial Center. So both financial centers within the UAE, the Financial Services Authority, and for the last 8 years I've been the managing partner of an organization called Governance Creed, Aqidat al-Hukuma, specifically focused on boards, board governance across the region, boardroom rotations, skill set mixes. I do serve on boards, but I try and not serve on too many, because otherwise I will conflict myself with my clients as well. Last but not least, I didn't marry the lady, I married the tribe. I'm married to an Arab. My kids speak fluent Khaliji Arabic at home. So the Middle Eastern culture, you cut me in half. I was raised in the region. So I've probably got very traditional family values from the region that you wouldn't normally expect with somebody who's either a Brit or a Swiss. Last but not least, I have 3 children. My son is Skander, so Abu Skander. And when I'm not dealing with boards or sitting on boards, I'm a passionate horseman, and I've had the pleasure of actually playing polo against the Royal Army here in the Sultanate as well. So that's a very brief background on myself. What I'd like to do is take us through a journey, fundamentals of corporate governance. Where has this all come from? G20, OECD, and others. the role of a board of directors these days, and this has evolved hugely in the last 10 to 15 years. Role of management, the segregations of roles and responsibilities, delegations of authority, strategy, and the importance of internal audit in terms of that strategy process. Then I'm going to delve into a model that I created some time ago with Governance Creed about what does a board expect from its internal audit function. Literally going through some of the details, some of the key finding points, getting the right balance in terms of reporting through the audit committee, in terms of the transfer and the transparency of information from the audit function and the important work you do to coming up to the board members and hopefully helping us manage the liabilities and risks that we take as board members personally, the relationship, the trust, the expectations, and then hopefully achieving the right balance along the way. If you have any burning questions towards the end, and if we have time available, I'm looking at the organizers, I have absolutely no issues whatsoever taking some questions from the audience. Okay, so let's start with some basic fundamentals. How does corporate governance really work inside an organization? Now, traditionally, you would have shareholders, and these shareholders will appoint and elect or dismiss a board of directors. And that board of directors is expected to act as stewards representing the best interests of the organization and the shareholders. One of the key roles and responsibilities of that board of directors is to appoint and oversee the C-suite. So your chief executive, your CFO, your COO, and others. They will report back formally at regular board meetings and informally at strategy retreats, board dinners. I'm somebody that encourages a lot of interaction between the board of directors and the C-suite of the organization. Now, the shareholders will provide capital to the C-suite, and the C-suite in return is expected to generate a return on investment for that capital for the shareholders. So this basic model is what we in the governance world would call the agency concept or the agency model. Okay, so let's drill down into a few details and include the internal audit function in this. So you would have shareholders at an annual general shareholders meeting, and they would appoint and or dismiss your board of directors, and your board of directors will report back formally on a regular basis at AGMs to your shareholders. Your shareholders simultaneously at the AGM will appoint your external auditors. And those external auditors are expected to report back once per year at your AGMs to your shareholders, but they're also going to be reporting on a regular basis to the board of directors, and they will do that through the audit committee. Your board of directors, in their terms of references, will have the ability to appoint certain committees. And the types of committees you have depends on the industry you are in. If you're in the oil and gas industry, you'll have a reserves committee. If you're in the education industry, you might have an academic committee. If you're in banks or insurances, you'll be required by the regulators to have a separate risk committee as well. So you have a whole structure of committees advising and supporting, including the audit committee. And that audit committee should be appointing independently the chief internal auditor officer. And I was glad to see in Munir's introductions at the beginning that 97% of your audit functions within the Sultanate now report independently, so not through the executive, not through the chief executive, but via the audit committee and have access straight to the board of directors. You'll have other committees, and you're expecting that your external auditors and your internal auditors will have some sort of a collaboration between them, relying on each other's reports and work committed. Board of directors will appoint your chief executive, and in the old days, we would just appoint the chief executive. These days, it's actually much better practice for the board of directors to also be involved in the appointment of your secondary C-suite level as well. So your CFO, your COO, chief risk officer, and others. Your chief executive will have an executive committee of the executive. This is their weekly meeting or bi-weekly meeting where your chief executive is ensuring that we've got alignment and coordination between all our C-suite functions. And your internal auditors will come and cross-check in the organization compliance with policies, procedures, and processes, and policies as defined by the board of directors. So when I'm the chairman of a board and we're coming up with certain policies, be they ethical policies, codes of conduct, or others, I would be expecting my internal audit function to be able to go and cross-check compliance and make sure that those are being implemented throughout the organization. My external auditors coming and checking my quarterly reports and my annual reports, and we will have something called a delegations of authority. Who's allowed to do what throughout the organization, to what extent? And I've got a specific section on the delegations of authority coming in, and what I require from you as my internal auditors in terms of cross-checking and verifying that delegations of authority. Now, all of this is going to be subject to the rules, laws, and regulations of the land, any corporate governance codes that are applicable to our industry or that have come through local legislation in the country, articles of association, internal policies and procedures, the board charter, which will stipulate very, very clearly what shareholder expectations are of the board of directors, and then last but most definitely not least, policies including things like the code of ethics. So what we've got up there on the screen is a very high-level, one-page, high-level ecosystem of what corporate governance across organizations traditionally would look like. I often get the question, can you please define for me in a very simple language, what is corporate governance? And one of the easiest ways of thinking about corporate governance was defined by Sir Adrian Cadbury. And Sir Adrian Cadbury said very simply, corporate governance is the system by which we direct and control our organizations. So whenever you bump into your chairman and you were mentioning that you were at the IIA event and you're in the lift, and if you ever get asked the question, well, what is corporate governance? It's very simple. It's the systems by which we direct and control our organizations. There are other definitions that get more detailed, and one of the clearly understandable definitions came from a chap called Bob Tricker. And Bob Tricker was the very first person that ever came up with the words corporate governance together. And he said, if management, your C-suite, is about running the business, the board or governance is about making sure that it's being run properly. So already a very clear definition in terms of the segregations of role between management, which is to run the business, and the board of directors, which is to make sure that the business is being run properly. Now, Bob Tricker said that all companies need both. They need management to run the business and governance or the board to ensure the oversight and making sure that the organization is being run properly. So if we go back to this diagram, that means that these chaps here, they're responsible for running the business, whereas the board of directors is responsible for ensuring that the business is being run properly. And there's a concept I often use when I'm training board members, and it's called the nose in. So as a board member, because we're personally liable for everything that happens inside the organization, as a board member, I am entitled to know absolutely everything. Do I want to know everything? No, of course not. But I have the right to access to information across the entire organization. So nose in, yes, but my fingers are out. I'm not management. So I have the right to access to information. I have the right to make sure that the business is being run properly, but the fingers is for the executive. So that concept is called the NIFO concept, the nose in, fingers out in terms of the roles and responsibilities. What we've seen over the last 10 years in the GCC and in Oman is a huge raising of the bar in terms of the quality of not just rules and regulations, but in terms of the implementation of those rules and regulations. And we're starting to see that the GCC has caught up very, very quickly with global standards of corporate governance, and there's been a rapid convergence to the global standards that we have. Now, where have those standards all come from? So let's take an example. We'll take country A, and country A will have local government, a central bank, a stock exchange, and they will be issuing rules, codes, regulations, and others. And all those rules, codes, regulations, and others will impact your small and medium enterprises, your family businesses, your publicly listed joint ventures, financial services, and others. Now, that will exist across the majority of countries globally. So where do they get all of the input for these rules, laws, regulations, and others? And there are four main bodies. The first one is the Bank of International Settlement, or the Central Bank for Central Bankers, which is based in Basel in Switzerland. The second one, and the third one, is the G20, the group of the top 20 economies globally, and the OECD, or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Last but not least, we also have the United Nations, so SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, Prudential Investment, and others all come from the UN. We've got 190 countries globally signed up to the G20 and the OECD. All BIS members, all 63 of them, include all the G20 members. And then we've got about 130 countries globally signed up to the United Nations. And this is why, when they emit recommendations to the local countries, and the local countries translate those into rules, laws, regulations, and codes, that's why we see similarities between one country and another country, but it's also why we see the differences, because it's subject to local interpretation. So as a board member, if I sit on the board of a bank in the UAE, and then I sit on the subsidiary of that bank in Muscat, I've got to be very aware that the local rules, laws, regulations, whilst maybe 80% of them are similar, there will be differences between them. And as a local board member sitting on a local entity, I've really got to ensure that I understand the local regulatory requirements for the entity whose board I sit on here. Okay, so what's the business case? Why have we seen so much focus on the evolution of corporate governance over the last few years? Now, according to the IFC and the World Bank, the benefits of good governance are actually very, very transparent. The first one is it will improve your access to external finance. The better the perception of your corporate governance as an organization, the more people will be willing to lend to you. There's a lower perception of risk. If you've got the right checks and balances and risk management, internal audit, external audit, transparency, reporting, a good board, and others, the perception of you managing your risks is substantially higher. As a consequence, it gets a lot easier for you to gain access to debt. Not only will it improve your access to financing, but it will actually lower your weighted average cost of capital. The better the perception of governance, the cheaper your local banks are willing to lend to you, because obviously banks are looking at a risk return adjusted, and the lower the perception of risk, the cheaper the access to capital for you. It'll improve your operational performance. And I really appreciated some of the comments that were made this morning in terms of internal audit moving from just the checks and balances to actually adding value to an organization. So as a chairman, I'm hoping that you can actually contribute to improving checks and balances and processes within the organization, rendering the organization a lot more efficient in terms of our performance. It will increase the valuation of our organization long term. It will generate a higher return on investment for our shareholders. It'll improve the trust. The more transparency we have with the market, the better our governance, the more we will be able to reinforce that trust with the stakeholders that we have. It'll reduce the probability of scandals. we've had a lot of issues both in the West, and I will cover a few examples, and we've had some issues in the GCC region recently as well, and I'll delve into one or two of those. At the end of the day, well-governed organizations will draw a premium. McKinsey did a survey in the GCC, it must have been about 20 years ago, and they came to the conclusion that global institutional investors are willing to pay a 25% premium. I'll say that again, a 25% premium for well-governed organizations in a region that back then didn't necessarily have the reputation for well-governed organizations. So you will attract a premium for your organizations, and good governance helps you generate a better return on investment for your, not just your shareholders, but your stakeholders. Now, there is a cost to good governance. You need to pay for independent board members, and I've always been of the opinion you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And when I sit on NRCs, nomination remuneration committees, when I do skill set rotations for board members, I'm always trying to attract the highest caliber of potential board members that I can to the board of directors, because the better the board I can build, the more value that board is going to generate for the organization. So even if I pay a board of directors twice the average, and they're the top quality I can possibly attract, I know that they're going to pay for themselves 100 times or 200 times in terms of the value that they will generate for the organization. We'll need the right governance structures, the right board committees, the right internal audit functions, the right compliance functions. We'll need our quarterly reporting along with our transparency, a chief governance officer, board secretaries, especially if we're a large group and we have multiple boards within our group. That's governance within governance. It gets a lot more complex. Recognized external auditors. I want the reputation of my chief internal auditor to be outstanding. We'll need to have the right policies, the procedures in place. There are about 30 to 40 key policies that boards should regularly be looking at, and a risk appetite, delegations of authority, a subsidiary governance framework in place. Now, global leaders in terms of the subject matter of corporate governance substantially believe that the benefits of good corporate governance by far outweigh the costs of good corporate governance. Without good corporate governance, we generally end up with the board and senior management failing to set strategy properly. From that, once you get away with poor disclosure once, you then do it twice, it then becomes a habit. And if we haven't got the right checks and balances that good governance gives us, we end up with too much power being focused on one or two individuals. Some of you may know that 30 years ago, if I looked at publicly listed entities in the US on the S&P 500, about 67% of organizations had a joint chairman and CEO role. Way too much power in one individual. It's now less than 30% of listed organizations in the US have an overlap between those two roles. So they've clearly now segregated the roles and responsibilities of the chairman of the board from the chief executive of the organization. When we also have too much power on one or two individuals, typically you'll find that we don't set up the right checks and balances. We don't want to have the right controls in place. And when we have a lack of the right controls in place and too much power centered on one or two individuals, that is typically when we end up with breaking news and issues having gone wrong in the press. Some of you will recall Enron, that gave birth to Sarbox 404, Sarbanes-Oxley. Some of you will recall WorldCom, more recently Lehman Brothers, that gave the start to the 2008 global financial crisis. And there's an excellent film called The Wizard of Lies. You can find it, I think, on Netflix. It's actually quite a factual recap of exactly what happened at the Bernie Madoff situation, the largest Ponzi scheme in the world. It's an excellent film to go and watch if you want to try and understand how people managed to get away with it for so long. In the Middle East, unfortunately, Abraj, I was the Chief Operating Officer for the Dubai Financial Services Authority. I'd left before the Abraj situation occurred. Abraj had been committing fraud, mismanagement, lack of reporting. Unfortunately, the external auditor had also signed off on the accounts for 5 years on the run. There'd been extensive collaboration behind the scenes between the external auditor and the organization. It caused a $18 billion collapse within the GCC region and destroyed the GCC's reputation for private equity, and even now we're still suffering from those old historical issues. NMC, the hospital group in Abu Dhabi recently, Drakenschool, one of the construction companies, MMG in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Mobili as well. And I apologize if your logo is blue. I do not know why, but all the elements on the right-hand side, the logos have been blue. It's got nothing to do with the color of your logo. It's got to do with the good governance in place. So again, we go back to the concept that good corporate governance not only generates value, but actually protects the interests of your shareholders and your stakeholders. Okay, let's now jump to what is the role and responsibility of a board of directors? And I'm going to boil it down into 4 key roles with 2 objectives. So the first objective of a board of directors is to set strategy for the organization. In the old days, that used to be the responsibility of the chief executive. And I will talk us through a little bit later on the division of roles and responsibilities between what is the board meant to do in terms of the strategy process and what is the executive meant to do in terms of strategy process. So the first thing is set strategy. Where are we now? Where do we want to be in 5 years' time? And how are we going to get there? Now, you can set the best strategy in the world, but if you do not have the talent to be able to implement that strategy, the value creation is going to be 0. So one thing is setting a really good strategy. The other thing is attracting and retaining the caliber of talent to implement that strategy. I sit on the Nominations and Remuneration Committee of a financial services organization regulated in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, specifically in the region of Jeddah. And I've just been reappointed for my second term of 3 years on their NRC, and I've done 2 boardroom rotations for them so far, including appointing their first lady ever to the board. And the big challenge I have is that Riyadh is attracting all the talent out of Jeddah. 30% increases, 40% increases. I'm competing with PIF, I'm competing with sovereign wealth funds, and trying to retain and develop the caliber of my local talent is a major issue for us. So the first one is strategy. The second one is talent. The third one is performance. As a board member, I'm responsible on behalf of the shareholders to look at the generation of return on investment, not just for shareholders, but for stakeholders as well. So strategy, talent, performance, and the last one is managing risk. How much risk are we willing to take to generate what sort of return on investment for our shareholders? Now, there's a cautious balance here. You don't take any risks, you won't get any return. You get good at managing those risks. You can take slightly more risks than your competitors in your industry, and as a consequence, generate a potentially higher return on investment for your shareholders. So those are the 4 key roles of a board, and there are 2 objectives. The first objective, well, we're here to actually generate shareholder value. We're here to generate a return on investment for our shareholders. Now, I came from the old world where the business of business was business. The sole purpose of an organization was to generate a return on investment for your shareholders. And it didn't matter what we did to the community. It didn't matter what we did to our stakeholders. If we did open pit mining, what we did to the environment didn't matter either. These days, being a board member is a lot more complex. I'm not just balancing the return on investment for our shareholders, but I now also need to look after our stakeholders. And that includes the community, our people, our employees, our suppliers, our environment, and the others around us. I will make a controversial comment. If I, as a board member, overcompensate and overtake care of my stakeholders at the cost of my shareholders, my shareholder capital will migrate elsewhere. So it's a very cautious balance around the boardroom table between generating an appropriate return on investment for the shareholders, taking into account the risks that we're taking, but also taking care of our stakeholder community. Okay, let's move on from that and talk about the complexities that have happened in the boardroom over the last 15 years. 15 years ago, if I gave you a business card that said I was a board member of a bank, it was prestigious. All right, I'm at the end of my career. I go to 4 board meetings per year. I might have a long lunch, and khalas, thank you very much. It looks good. That's no longer the case. These days, as a board member, I am personally liable. I am financially liable. I am legally liable. My reputation is on the line if something happens to this organization. We've had challenging economic environments with lots of volatility. We've had complexity of business has increased dramatically. We've also seen shareholder activism. This never used to happen in the Middle East. Shareholder activism only ever really happened in the West. I've now been at AGMs where I've seen board members removed, I've seen shareholders removed at the AGM in a public format with 300 people in the room. Our management cycle has got shorter. In the old days, if I was a board member and I had a CEO, I would expect that CEO to be with us 9, 10, 12 years. These days, if you get appointed to a board, you're typically on the board for at least 2 cycles. That's 2 cycles of 3 years, coming up to 6 years. More often than not, if you're performing as a board member, you'll stay on for 3 cycles of 3, which is 9 years. Generally not more than 9 years, because then you don't meet the independence requirements according to a lot of our regulators up and down the Middle East. So I, as a board member, when I join a board, know that my average life cycle of a CEO is now 5 years. So I will undergo at least 1 CEO board rotation under my watch. And it's highly stressful for a board. Where are we going to find somebody that understands the industry, has the vision, has the leadership that we trust, that can actually drive the organization in terms of creating shareholder value? All right, let me move forward relatively quickly. We're seeing that a lot of our roles have moved from fiduciary to value generation. We used to have compliant boards historically, or complacent boards. Boardroom composition, skill set mixes weren't discussed. Multiple board memberships existed. So we used to have board members, as this particular individual, who chaired about 20 boards and sat on 40 boards. It's just physically not possible to be able to do that. From about 2000 to 2007, we moved on to the control, the fiduciary role and responsibility, and then we had the global financial crisis. And what we've now started to see is boards are a lot more focused on the future. We're a lot more focused on, yes, we need the right checks and balances and controls in place, but it's all about looking at generating shareholder value and contributing to the strategic side. If I look at some time of how boards allocate their time in the boardroom, and I take some very, very clear examples of leading organizations globally, you will now start to find that boards are allocating a significant amount of their time, no longer on the compliance and the checks and balances and the risk management side. Those have got to happen. Those get pushed down to the committees. But a board in itself is now spending roughly 1/3 of its time or more in terms of strategy for the organization. How are we going to beat and thrash the competition? So a lot more effort in terms of strategy. Let me jump from strategy into something called a delegations of authority. Now, how does the delegations of authority work inside an organization? And this is something that I always like to use pictures and analogies. So for me, the organization is a car. I happen to be a bit of a petrol head. I like Bentleys. So for me, that's the organization. And the chief executive is driving the vehicle. They're the one, she or him, behind the steering wheel. The chairman of the board is in the passenger seat. Now, they both need to agree the destination of the vehicle. What's the strategy? But that's where the overlap of their roles and responsibilities stops. The chairman needs to ensure that the entire vehicle is roadworthy. We've got the right checks and balances. He needs to make sure that we've got the right access to capital for the organization. We've got good risk management in place. He needs to ensure that his fellow board members sitting in the back and the shareholders in the boot are comfortable with the speed of the vehicle. A chairman needs to put a lot of oil on the works. This is the diplomatic skill set. Sometimes your shareholders don't always align. Sometimes there are issues that need to be solved behind the scenes. So you need to put the oil on the elements. We need the right safety checks. I want the right indicators. I want my red lights, my green lights, and I need internal audit to give that to me. I need transparency on our vision. Where are we going? I need to be able to see the future. Now, my chief executive should be able to operate the accelerator independently, operate the brake, the steering, plan the minor trip details. Yes, we've agreed on the high-level strategy. Whether or not we go around the roundabout this way or that way is up to the chief executive. Choose some minor deviations on the way. Overtake. If the weather is really good, the sun's shining, there's no traffic on the road, there's nothing stopping you accelerating the organization. Simultaneously, if we have some economic challenges and there's a storm arriving, we want to be able to slow down. Now, just in case we have this behind us, so you've got the Financial Services Authority in the background or some sort of regulator, the chairman of the board needs to ensure that the vehicle is licensed and also needs to ensure that the driver is licensed. The only time the chairman of the board should reach across and grab the steering wheel or stamp on the brakes is to prevent a major accident. Otherwise, we have a very clear segregation of roles and responsibilities between the board on one side, with the chairman, and the chief executive on the other. Now, sitting behind, in the back seat, is my fellow board members. And they play two key roles. One is setting the direction of the organization, as we talked about, and two is ensuring the right control in place. Okay, now if we're doing both of those, we as board members are actually satisfying our fiduciary duties, the minimum requirements under the law of the country. So, the chairman of the board is responsible for managing the board of directors. And it's the board of directors collectively that is responsible for overseeing the CEO. The CEO is responsible for managing the organization. What we do not want is for the chairman of the board to try and manage the organization. And the number of times I've seen this in family businesses across the GCC, where you're hiring a foreign CEO that doesn't understand the culture. They come in thinking they're going to be the CEO, and actually they haven't realized that actually the chairman's the CEO, and they're the COO. And because we have no clear delegations of authority, we end up with a clash, and within 3 years, the CEO has left. So you need to understand the cultural aspects of this as well. I've also seen some highly manipulative CEOs, and I have served as a chairman with a highly manipulative CEO that try and manage and influence the board of directors. So the way you try and get this done is you set up a very clear delegations of authority, which splits the roles and responsibilities between both sides. So on one side, you have matters reserved for the board of directors. And that will come from your legislation, your articles of association, and others. The board will delegate responsibilities to its committees, but ultimately retains the liability and the responsibility for what happens. That's why most committees of boards are not authorized to make decisions. They're authorized to make recommendations to the board. Then the board will delegate to the chief executive certain roles and responsibilities within limits to the chief executive. Now, the chief executive may, if they so choose, delegate further inside the organization, but the board is holding the chief executive accountable and responsible for every single delegation given from the board to the executive. And this is where I need you chaps. I believe in trusting, but I also believe in trust and verify. So whilst I, as a chairman or a board member, am going to delegate certain roles and responsibilities to the chief executive, I need you guys, as internal audit, to come and cross-check and sample and make sure that that delegations of authority is being respected inside the organization. So that's one of my first key roles for you chaps, is finding that right balance between what does the board wish to retain for itself, and how much and what extent does the board trust the executive and delegate down to the executive. I've always found in the Middle East, and remember I'm married to a Middle Eastern family, the GCC is home for me. We're way too conservative as board members. If we don't trust our executives, change the executives. Find executives that you can trust, give them the right delegations of authority to get on with the business, but verify. Use your internal audit to come and cross-check and make sure that everything's in place. You can have schedules of delegations of authority. This one is very, very simple. This is a whole bank on an A2 slide. So you can simplify it and make it come up in ways that work extremely easily. Strategy. Okay. Who is Roger Federer? Anybody in the audience? Roger Federer? Tennis player, thank you very much. So Roger Federer is known as one of the leading global best players of tennis in the world. And again, I like to use analogies. So Roger Federer, back in 2015, made $47 million as a player in 1 year. If I said to you, let's switch him to badminton, what's your reaction going to be? I can see smiles out in the audience. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. So there are two main drivers to value creation. If we look at our average top 10 racket players in the world back then, the average earned in terms of fees for those players was about $1 million each. Whereas if you look at the top 10 tennis players, the average earned was $14 million each. So there's a premium for tennis being a lucrative sport. The next thing we look at is Roger Federer. He didn't earn the $14 million, he earned the $47 million. So there's a premium to be paid for your skill set. So there are two key drivers. One, the industry that you play in has a major impact on the return on investment that you generate for your shareholders. Two, the skills with which you play in that industry is the second major driver of value. So which industry you choose and with what skills you play has a dramatic impact on that return on investment that you create. Let's talk about strategy. Framing is where are we now and where do we want to be in 5 years' time? Options. I'm expecting the executive to come up with multiple options. Then we, the board, have to choose one of these options. We then need to commit and implement, and we need to follow up with it afterwards. So let me put this in a diagram format for you. So, framing, where are we now? And where do we want to be in 5 years' time? Options. I want you, the executive. Are we going to go across the mountain to get to that end? Are we going to go across the desert to get to that end? Or are we going to go across the sea? Those are three fundamentally different strategies that get us to the same objective. The board, at a board strategy retreat, will then need to choose one of these that best fits our skill sets, gives us the advantage, allows us to thrash the competition, and then as a board, we need to follow and monitor the implementation of that strategy along the way. Okay, so let's look at the world's top 2,400 organizations and look at how they compete from an industry perspective and from a skill set perspective. So if I break these down, you will see a distribution curve, the yellow line. And this is really interesting because the bottom 20% of our top 2,400 organizations suffer deep losses, regularly, repeated. The middle 60 more or less break even. I'm talking about the top 2,400 organizations. And the top 20% capture 90% of the profits. Actually, they make 30 times more than the ones sitting in the middle. So the question is, why? Why are we seeing such a difference? And it's really interesting to note that over a 10-year period, 78% stayed in the middle, where they were. About 14% slipped down, and only 8% moved up from the middle into the top earners. Now, how did they do that? They either acquired other organizations, or they refocused and became an expert in a certain area, or they invested, or they increased productivity, or whatever it is that they did, they came out with a better strategy. So the real question for you is, does your organization beat 92% of the players in your market? In other words, you need to be in the top 8% to absolutely thrash your competition in terms of your strategy. And the importance and value of internal audit to that going forward is going to be absolutely critical. So, when I first met Munir, I can't see you, sir, you're somewhere around, I said, I want to model what a board expects from internal audit. And I spent a lot of time with some of my colleagues mapping this out. And this is the model I want to share with you. So the first thing we want is we want a comprehensive risk assessment. I, as a chairman, I want you chaps either to be helping the risk management function or doing it yourselves. I want the security that you know all the risks. That's number one. Number two, I want to make sure that we've got effective controls in place. We could spend a fortune on controls that are ineffective. I want to make sure we've got the right controls that are implemented and that are actually working. I'd like objective reporting. I need you as my eyes and ears, my checks and balances, to be objective. Don't get pulled into the politics. Please be as impartial as you possibly can. Give us the real transparency and your objectivity and your views. I want your recommendations to be actionable. Please come up with recommendations that if the board says yes or the audit committee says yes, we can actually put those recommendations into practice. That's the recommendations. The follow-up, please follow up and make sure that if we've said yes to a recommendation, that it's actually been implemented afterwards. Now, this is where I align with some of the views that were shared by our keynote speaker this morning. I actually want internal audit heavily involved in our strategy process as well, helping us in terms of making sure that the right checks and balances and the evolution are there. Fraud, detection and prevention. I, as a board member, am personally liable. It's my reputation on the line. Please help me make sure that we've got the right checks and balances on the fraud side in place. You're not just protecting our shareholders, you're protecting me as well. Adaptability, your continuous improvement. That was another thing I really liked from the president of the IIA that we heard of this morning, is the way that you're trying to evolve and grow. That's exactly what I want you chaps to do as a board member. Your competence, we were talking about developing students and training students and developing the internal audit capacity in the Omani market and others. Spot on. I'm going to need more of you chaps in the future. Last but not least, regular communications between us. I want a brilliant relationship between my head of internal audit and the chair of my audit committee. This can be broken down into 4 sections. 1, the mutual respect and the importance of your independence to the organization. 2, the confidentiality and the integrity that we have between the board and internal audit. 3, the transparency and openness. And that comes back to the trust relationship that I absolutely want between the chair of my audit committee and the head of your internal audit function. And last but not least, the reliability and the consistency in place. Those for me are absolutely critical. So there's a judgment call I need from you chaps. Out of all your internal audit findings, 80% of them are going to represent a relatively minor impact on the organization. What I as a board member want to know from you is that top 20% that represents the high impact on the organization. So I want you to have a judgment call in terms of that. I need you to decide what I need to know. So please, I need a big nose so that you can smell it. I need the wisdom, the gray hair, the white experience, but I also need you to have a good, positive relationship with the executive as well. That's the first one. The second one, I need you to know when to call me at 2 o'clock in the morning. You've got my mobile number. If there's something I need to know about, please pick up the phone and call. And that's the judgment experience. So for me, it's a balance again. And in the old days when I was an executive, I thought internal audit, I thought you guys were a pain in the backside. Right? Please, I'm the one generating the return on investment. I'm the one generating the sales. You're asking me the questions over and over again. Please, could you step aside and just let me get on with my business? Now that I'm liable for the organization, boy, have I suddenly changed my view in terms of the importance and the value that internal audit brings to an organization. So for me, you guys are the beating heart at the middle of this model. And internal audit for me, these days, you guys are worth more than your weight in gold to me. So I've changed completely in terms of my views over the last few years. A few years ago, back in 2007, I was moderating a panel for the Institute of Internal Auditors back in Dubai. I had a lot more hair back then than I do now. I had Nick Leeson. Some of you will know Nick Leeson as the rogue trader from Barings Bank. He was the first major rogue trader. He was sitting beside me. Beside Nick Leeson, I had the head of internal audits of Dubai Holding, Emirates Airlines, one of the HSBC, and Majid Al Futtaim. And I was moderating this panel. A little bit less gray hair and experience than I have now. And I asked a question. And before that, the day before, I'd interviewed Sharon Watkins, who was the whistleblower for Enron, and I'd also interviewed Justice King, who has written King 1, King 2, King 3, King 4, which are some of the best global standards in terms of corporate governance. And my question was the following. I said, I want the panel to answer yes or no. There's no yanny political, it's a yes or a no. We are in 2007, March. And I said, will we see a major failure in Dubai in the next 3 years due to the lack of internal controls, risk management, and weak corporate governance? Now, back then, I was working for the Dubai Financial Services Authority, all right? I was the COO, but I was not as politically savvy as I am now. I'm not sure I would be asking these questions these days. Now, I put Nick next to me because I knew Nick was going to say yes. I've been on the lecture circuit with Nick. Nick said yes. I was expecting everybody else to play the political game and say no. So when the head of internal audit for Dubai Holdings said yes, and then both the joint heads of internal audit of Emirates Airlines said yes, just like now, there was absolute silence in the room. You could hear a pin drop. HSBC said yes, and the family business said yes. Now, this wasn't the big issue. The big issue was the next morning. The next morning, headlines in Gulf News said corporate failure in Dubai likely, and quoted the panel as well. So I've always been extremely cautious in terms of asking questions in public. Ladies and gentlemen, I have 2 big thank yous to give today. Can I give a big thank you to the Institute of Internal Audit? You've got 300 members, but more than 300 people in the audience. I'm not sure how you've done that. So a big, big thank you to the Institute of Internal Audit. Ladies, you've been absolutely amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much. A real pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jan. for that outstanding presentation and your amazing spirit. Your insights were both practical and fundamental. The emphasis on collaboration truly underscores the importance of effective corporate governance. Let's give another round of applause for Jan Bland, please.
Our next session, Transforming Internal Audit into a Strategic Advisor Role, will commence with a panel discussion moderated by Farhan Malik. Farhan has over 20 years of leadership experience in the internal audit field, and he led the internal audit department in telecom company in South Asia, and is now working as a senior advisor to the CAE in Oman. He is also a board member of IIA Oman and chairs the education committee of the board. Please join me in welcoming Farhan Malik to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. So since morning, I think there are some common themes or words which we are hearing from all the speakers, and one of that is compliance. And another word I think that is common across was the independence. So historically, as we have also seen in Ayan's presentation, in the lot of emphasis is placed on internal audit compliance role and their independence. And in that way, what we are doing is that we are losing the sight where the boards are putting more effort. So we have seen that 30% of the board's time goes toward the strategy, and how much internal auditors' time goes toward the strategy, I think it would be the other way around, on a very small percentage. So the key question, I think, as of now is how to transform internal audit into a strategic role. IIA in the Vision 2035 we have seen has come up with the idea of this strategic advisor. So today's theme of this panel is how to transform internal audit into more strategic role. And I would like to invite our speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Abdul Rahman Al-Harsi. He's a Chief Assurance Officer at OQ Group. He has over 24 years of experience of internal audit risk and governance part, and he's on the board of a number of the companies in public and private sector. Let's welcome Mr. Abdul Rahman on the stage. Our second guest speaker is Mr. Abdul Qadir Ubaidali. He is the chairman of UAE IIA, and he's also on the board of number of the companies in UAE. He's also having a diverse experience of 35 years in IT, technology, audit, quality areas. Our third speaker is Ms. Taghreed Al-Lawati. She is the Chief Audit Executive of Omantel. She's having more than 20 years of experience of internal audit, risk control, and governance. And we can start our session over here. So in the morning, we are hearing from Anthony the word strategic advisor, and those who are old in this profession, they are always hearing the word of a trusted advisor. But the presentation which is made by Ian just before that, he was emphasizing again on the role of compliance itself. So in that way, what we have seen that there is different expectation of different stakeholders from internal audit department. So my first question is from Mr. Abdul Qadir, that what is the differentiating feature of a strategic advisor, and how do you distinguish a strategic advisor from the normal inter-audit function?
What a question to start with. Can you hear me? Why is it so light, dark in the back? We don't want them to go to sleep, you know. Yeah, it's much better now, I think. Thank you. You know, looking at it, can I put a scenario?
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay? The CEO is sitting and waiting, and how busy the CEOs are. And all of a sudden, there are 3 people waiting outside. The first one is the Chief Marketing Officer. The second person is the Chief Operation Officer. And the third is you truly, the Chief Audit Executive. Which one the CEO would see? Guys, anybody would like to volunteer? Anthony, which one you would think? Audit. If you didn't say that, I'd be very surprised. Trusted advisor to a strategic advisor. I think it's a nice shift. If you have a problem in your own life, a personal problem, who would you go to? You would go to your best trusted friend. He or she would give you that advice. Where we see ourselves going forward is that, yes, there are 3 people and very important people outside. We're going to be in a position where the Chief Audit Executive is that strategic advisor who will make sure that the CEO, before he sees the other 2, he would bring that Chief Audit Executive and say, come and sit next to me. I want to hear what is new for us in terms from the Chief Marketing Officer. Or for that matter, I also want to see if we do have an operational issue. Very simple. You need to make sure you are very well versatile in the subject matter of what you're doing as a business. That goes without saying. But the 3 trends that I see the Chief Audit Executive is being innovative, agile, and IT savvy. This is where I see personally our role to be that strategic advisor, not only for the Chief Audit Executive, but for all of the C-suite that we have in the organization, and in turn, become that listening person to the chairman of the audit committee. Thanks.
Thank you. So my question on this, on the same part from Mr. Sheikh Abdul Rahman Al-Harsi, is that since you have lived that journey and you have lived that experience, so what is the piece of advice for those who are just embarking on this journey of becoming a strategic advisor? So what are the do's and don'ts in the process?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think Ian wants us to be all tennis players, you know. Otherwise, we'll not make that much money. To answer your question, from my experience, I think as a chief executive, as C-suite, you need to position yourself. As a chief, you need to position yourself on the organization. Positioning yourself means you need to have all that knowledge, business acumen, because the chief executive of an auditor is the most visible person in the whole organization. He can see everything more than other executive within the management. So usually going back to the scenario made by my brother Abdul Qadir, If you don't have that, I'm sure the CEO will not pick you. Between the marketing executive or the operational executive COO, if you don't have that position and you have not positioned yourself and you have positioning your function within the organization and thinking how to transfer your internal audit as advisory, you will not get to that seat. From my experience in OQ, I have a permanent seat in the executive management meetings. So every 2 weeks, the management meets. In OQ, it's a big company in Oman, everybody knows. We start from exploration and production, all to midstream, and then to downstream, where refineries and the other manufacturing, all the way to selling and trading our products. So the chief executive officer is the only person in that room with the group CEO who have the full visibility of every operational and things. He knows the governance, he knows the business. Once you position yourself, immediately you will be called for that meeting. So I'm sitting in that. I don't want to take, the most important thing is the culture, how you fit your culture within your team. And please move that hierarchy within your team. Make sure, as we do, my experience the past few years, we made a good move and experiencing by moving the hierarchy within the team. We all respect each other, there's no doubt, but don't have that bureaucracy of hierarchy. This is my VP, this is a manager. I have to think out of the box and keep moving on with that, and have a good knowledge and skills of the business or whatever you do.
Thank you. So my next question is from Mr. Reed, because we have seen that boards, they place more value to independence and core assurance services when it comes to internal audit department. And what Mr. Abdul Rahman has explained, that now more and more audit department, and especially the heads, they are having seats in the executive committees, which sometimes is not very positively seen by the board, who actually demand total independence sometimes for chief auditor from the management. So how to balance this act? How to deal with the expectation of the board in such cases?
Assalamu alaikum. I think we'll start with a change in the mindset and change in the culture, ensuring the alignment between the audit committees, the management, and us. So I think to start this journey, for those who are going to start or starting, and we are all in this journey, so we need to align first and educate and have a discussions with our audit committees, that we being in the strategic meetings does not affect our independency. There is a thin line. After that, you move and have those discussions with the CEOs or the CXOs, because they also have some resistance sometimes. They have been in the culture where they don't see the CAE sitting with them while they are talking about their failures, they are talking about their mistakes, or where they did not achieve targets. So you need to educate them as well, that you being there will gonna add value at the end, and not the policing prospect or the perception that we have. So this is one main thing. The other thing is the trust relationship is very important. And that doesn't come overnight. And it's not only by the CAE. So CAE leads that as a chief audit. But even at the operation level, you need to create that trust. So trust and relationship is very important. And overcoming that fear, even internally, that do you need to know everything? Do you need to answer every question? No, it's the expertise that you have, the emotional intelligence, how do you deal, how do you communicate? I think those are the key elements of how do you start and grow in your transformation to strategic advisor.
From Mr. Abdul Qadir, just one follow-up question on, because there is no one way to get the status of the strategic advisor or trusted advisor. And we normally say that you can become CAE or internal auditor by just getting the position, but this status must be earned through your trust building and with your what you call business acumen, with your ability to act professionally within the ethical part. So what are the different ways the companies, they have achieved this trusted advisor or strategic advisor position differently? If you can help them out, especially those companies who are having a small audit shop, so how can they achieve the same part?
You know, we just go back to the basic and knowing that, you know, we are in business to make money. Of course, we also have a lot to the other stakeholders, which is very important, as was indicated. I think when we talk about the word strategic, it has to be that we have to be first aligned with the strategy of the business. To try and to say that I am going to be doing my audit plan, in a way I'm just going to identify risks of the business, have a reset and look, is that really in line of where the business is going? Can we make sure that we are doing it to achieve the same goal? After all, we are internal auditors. We are not external auditors. We have a lot more responsibility. You know, you don't want to be in a position when something goes wrong and they say, where were the auditors? This is a phenomenon. But if you are actually seeing the business and then now predicting what's going to happen, it's gone the days where we can say about what really happened in the past. Can we be very close to the other combined assurances in the company and work together and internal audit take leads? I've seen in places where risk management and internal audit are coming together because we're all looking about what are the risks that's going to stop us achieving those objectives. So from that point of view, especially if you are a small workshop, okay, I think you have it much better. If you have it in a place where you're looking at the oil from the beginning till the end, it's not an easy job. Yep. Everybody expects the internal audit to be he or she to know everything. It's impossible. It's very much impossible. But if you really align yourself with the vision, and what I also would like is that we as an internal audit take the lead with compliance departments, assurance departments, risk management, fraud, IT security, where we are the catalyst, sitting underline all of them, bringing them together, making sure whatever they're doing, we as internal audit can take the lead and show it in front of the audit committee, or in this case, in the line of the government, to the top person of there, making sure that we understand what's very sensible for the organization. And something was mentioned, courage. Internal audit's courage. I think this is an acronym of any internal audit to become successful. A lot of people saying people don't like us. You will earn the respect if you can show them when you know there is something that's not going right, you stand your ground. And when I say you stand your ground, is that it's easier said than done.
Exactly.
You stand your ground, people will respect you for what you're saying. Thank you.
So one thing which Mr. Abdul Qadir has touched upon is the second line and collaboration with second line function. And what we have also seen in global IIA research, that over the period of time, the boundaries between internal audit and second line is getting blurred. And also, I think from your title, we have seen that you are not chief audit executive, you are chief assurance officer. So how did you achieve this blend of second line and internal audit within your function? And what are your experiences? Does it help you in achieving the role of strategic advisor?
So in OQ, we have already the combined assurance as part of the assurance as one under one umbrella. So the internal audit, the ERM, enterprise risk management, and we have what we call it is the project COE, which they do the state gate review for the project infrastructure. Although under each there's a separate pillars, but we all do, they report to the chief, and we make sure we all work together for the strategic of the company. That combination, we are complementing each other. Instead of overlapping with the same activities, we are doing the same work. So we don't own the risk. Many people think I'm owning the risk. No, I'm only managing the risk, which is I'm the center of excellence for the whole group. I'm making sure that the risk all around the group have the right standard. They are talking the same language. We have the same look and feel. Similar for the internal audit, we have the same standard. So we're working together, and more details are there. I'd like to add one more thing to Abdul Qadir regarding the internal audit. I want the chief internal auditor or the C-suite to move away from the word independence, not to be very paranoid about the independence. There's no one size fits all. So each organization have its own sizes and bigger and that. So we used to remember, if we call years back, we say in audit, in God we trust, other we audit. Started that. So everybody is like, I audit everybody, but I only trust God. Those things are moved. We have to work together with the management. We trust the management. We should be the champion of control and independence by engaging a lot with the executive and the management, and not just feeling and thinking the independence to its haram or halal. Sorry about that. So please think out of the box. Standard is good to use. Standard are guidelines, but they are not, you have to them. See what can fit for you and do, and go for it. So don't be sitting in your comfort zone and thinking independence will not move you away from your become a strategic and trustful internal audit.
One more question actually from Mr. Tagreed, because we have seen, and when we discuss with our colleagues in other companies about the strategic alignment or business alignment, most of them, their answer is that we are already aligning our internal audit plan with the strategy. At that time, we do consider the strategy. Is this enough, or is there any other way to be more strategically aligned with the company objectives and goals?
Actually, I will touch upon Sheikh Abdurrahman's point on the second line combined assurance function, because this is where you are also aligning the other areas with the strategy. So if you work closely with the second line functions, even if they are like, not reporting to you, like cybersecurity, for example, your risk management, this will help you also align strategically, because you cannot do everything by yourself. And for those who are having small audit departments, probably you need to take the initiative to strengthen your second line functions. I'll just give a couple of examples of what we did in Oman like 10 years back. We took the initiative to introduce the ERM. So we went to the management, we went to the board, and we sold the idea of having an ERM to them. And that was challenging, resistant at those days, but that paid off later on. And then now those ERM risks are strategically aligned, and they actually get discussed with the CXOs. So when you come and discuss with them, you are talking the same language. Cybersecurity is the same thing. Corporate security departments need support until they are built in certain companies. So you need to work with them. Going back to working with second line also helps with the strategy. Being in their C-suite workshops also helps. But also there are some informal advices that you need to give. Sometimes when you are sitting even in these workshops, there is a formality. So if you really see something going wrong, have one-to-one discussion with that CXO to align more strategically with him. So building that rapport helps even in a strategic aspect. Not everything has to be like in a formal report, in an independent way. So, and come out of the fear of, that, okay, if I give that advice and the company didn't do well, at the end, it is a even in your reports, when you are giving recommendations and advices, these are not perfect. So I think the auditors need to change from inside, from their perspectives and mindsets, that we need to give now strategic advice. We need to be more bold and not to just think of past. We need to be proactive with the management. And here where you will play the strategic advisor role.
So another, I think, important aspect which we have seen even in the survey in the morning, that perception of internal audit is still policing, compliance, independence, and the value and that strategic part is on a very lower side of that bar. So how can we change our perception? My next question is from Mr. Abdul Qadir. How can we change our perception, especially within our company stakeholders and profession and industry at a large?
It goes back to, it's not what you say, it's what you do. 68% of CEOs, when they are faced with a fraud case, they go to the chief audit executive. What we should be doing is, there is a difference between internal audit and fraud investigation. If we wanted to change that perception, we need to make sure that we act on it. First and most of, in our definition, we don't have, it's our job to look after fraud. Okay? So why we are the first one to approach? And what happened is, sometimes we feel proud when we're actually getting into investigation. They think, oh, this is something I really want to do. But talking personally, that I've actually worked within, in my career, in 10 years as a CAE, I had the fraud. And I've actually went on more than one occasion where I've asked the chief, the chairman, that I do not want to work in the fraud. I want somebody else to handle the fraud. Because you cannot go to a department and say, we are here trying to actually add value to you. Next week you turn because you're doing an investigation in the same place. So the perception comes from the fact is what we've been seen doing. My recommendation, please and please, separate those two functions. And you can go and speak to the audit committee or to the CEO and say, look, yes, I can, if I see something, I will let you know. I can work in the background and support. That's my role. But my main role is to identify the strategic risk to the organization, but don't let me be in charge of that. Yet, I see a lot of the internal audit, they feel very proud when they're working in investigation. I'm not saying if you're 3 people you can't, but trying to give it to other people who are more focused. They know how to do this because they're geared for it. Thank you.
Important aspect of what we have seen even in the Ian's presentation, that in order to implement any good strategy, you need a competent resources. The internal audit resources are already scarce, and when we look at the resources with strategic ability, forward-looking ability, in addition to internal audit, it becomes a very uphill task. So how did you manage to get resources there, and how you are keeping them or retaining them on board to ensure that sustainability is there within your function?
So what we did in my restructuring or in my operating model, my leaders, they all come from the business, by the way. They don't come from internal audit. It's true. Maybe some people, they will hate me here, and they will tell me, you don't trust your internal audit and your team. No, I do. But in order to move and transfer to strategic advisory, you need to bring the key people from the business. So my VPs, they all come from the business and they have different background. And then I have a pool of auditors, and they are mixed from different set skills. They are, by the way, technical, the engineers, real engineers and auditors and their finance, and they come from the legal background. All this structure and this nice symphony, I call it a symphony, they become a very talented internal audit. Plus, we do exchange. We call for what we call it guest auditors. We call people from the business to come and work with us 3 to 6 months, and that's support my team and help my team to improve and grow. And the other way around, I ask my team to go ahead and find an opportunity in the other function department, because maybe we are lucky OQ is a huge and big company. Those opportunities give them more opportunities. I don't know about the other department, just small, but don't stay still. Please find opportunity to exchange this information. Don't worry to bring somebody from outside, within the organization, and stay 1 or 2 years with you to help you and support. This is how you gain the board and the management trust of you going forward.
Thank you. My question from Mr. Agreed is, we have seen that technology around us evolving, but uptake of technology by internal audit function is on a very lower scale, what we have observed in the morning session as well. Coming from technology company, so how did you leverage the technology within internal audit department, and what are the lessons which we can share with others if they are going on that part?
I think I'll start by the lessons. Just start fast, don't wait, because if you delay the technology implementations in your own department, the management will be far ahead, and then they will see you as you are, like you're in a different boat and they are in a different boat. We did a couple of technology initiatives. As the surveys were mentioning, the audit management tool, we have started from 2015. Of course, we upgrade and we enhance. But in today's world, I think the data analytics becomes very important. And it is not only the technology, it goes along with the skill sets. So we can have the best of systems, but we don't have people that were using it. So I think we need to first integrate with the business. So you no longer rely on them to give you the information. You should have direct access. And you will have a lot of obstacles in that area, but you need to stand strong and have the right calibers in your department to support you in that. The data analytics tool differ. We are using a couple of them. Also the continuous monitoring and the continuous audit, that helps you. Like recently when we presented one of the reports to the audit committee and the CEO was there. Actually the CEO was surprised that we were able to give this analysis and not his management. So here where you add value. And when they see that value to the management in front of audit committee, you get more credit. We also embedded it in our procurement audits, which are we have to do yearly procurement audits. So if you do these as a continuous audit, it also helps you. Now coming to the AI and digital transformation, now being a telecom company and moving to the tech company, we do a lot of, as a company, they do a lot of initiatives, a lot of POCs. So we need to also showcase ourselves. So we are also working with them. We did not wait until they implement AI and we come and audit it. No, we also building our own POCs. So that gives the management and the audit committee that we are also testing and examining with them what they are going on. Another thing I would say in terms of technology, we need to champion the governance as well. Now with the AI, I was recently in one of the IMD courses, and the governance around the AI is still not very clear. So here we need to, like the auditors, we always had our framework, and we audit within that framework. Now this is something new for us, that we need to also work with the management to have that framework built for our own organization. And as Sheikh Abdurrahman was saying, every organization is different. So one of the things that we did, we gave the management 6 months to see what they are doing. And last week, we chaired one meeting with all the stakeholders of AI, being the technology, being the GRC, being the governance. And we had the talk, like, what are, as a company, we are doing for AI governance. And we put everything on table, and then we are discussing now what will be the best fit, because you don't want to kill the innovation as well. Put so many controls, so many governance, and then people will either do it behind you or they will not do it. So championing those transformation project governance within your own organization is another aspect where you can add value in the technology. It's not only by buying systems. In addition, you need to have dialogue with your audit committee, because I saw in IIA Oman the budget's constraints in certain areas. You need to sell the value to them and tell them to give you some buffer for 1 or 2 years, because you don't see the fruits of these projects very fast. Like when we did the continuous audit, and we are still working on that journey, it wasn't like 6 months and we got the results and everything, because you had to integrate, you had to challenge, all of these things. So I think you need the support of your audit committees, but have a dialogue with them, like, one-to-one. The chiefs have to visit each member probably of the audit committee, sell the idea to them, and then you get them all in one, like, official audit committee meetings.
So before we go to the audience, one final question, and I think again it's very basic, that is there any mix between, or because when we say strategic advisor, and I think some of people may have exposed to this term today when they have seen the 2035 vision of internal audit. So does it mean that we are losing the assurance part, or we are reducing the assurance part? Is there any ideal mix between assurance versus advisory service? So what is your take on it? And
I think Anthony touched on it, and he said there was a very nice slide. He said the 3 lines of defense, and he used the word blurred. This is on a personal note, nothing to do with IIA, but we are, as an internal audit, we are part of the whole organization. If I want to change that pradana, I say, we are actually in a football game. Everybody knows football, isn't it? We are not the Messi, we are not the Ronaldo of the game. They are the other people, actually, their job is to actually score the goals. We are the goalkeepers. In our organization, if we miss something, we can score that. Yet, we are 50% of the team. You cannot win a football match unless you have a very strong goalkeeper. So I look at it from that point of view, because sometimes goalkeepers score goals. And we can score goals. So I want to look at it from that perspective, in something that we really can easily understand and see. So this is really how I really see it going forward. Because you may imagine, if you miss, you could score that, and everybody would talk to you. Thanks.
thank you very much. Now we open the floor for questions. So
Just add.
please.
His comment. Very, very fruitful. I think we need to understand what does it mean advisory role, and what is the objective of it. We don't want you to wake up tomorrow morning and throwing everything aside and just start strategy and advisory and so on. Please be careful. These things take step by step. We need to have the tone at the top. Once the board is clear what we are, our mandate, and what we are exactly planning to do, and we audit our strategy to them, we need to mention something that we are planning to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's very important to understand the objective and what does it advisory mean, and what exactly your role in that advisory role. So don't become a BCG tomorrow morning consultant. So be careful. So that can fire back on you, and you're gonna lose everything. So that's my 2 cents for that.
Thank you very much. So anyone from floor?
Yeah, this is Anis from Walters Kluwer teammate. excellent panel. I think we can continue for the rest of the lunch if we don't stop them. Just quoting Abdul Qadir's analogy of the goalkeeper, I mean, the goalkeeper also needs to know the game to play. And taking his point of, go where the business strategy is, I think the other two panelists already have given us the solution. I mean, as Tagreed said about skill set, technology, and Sheikh Abdul Rahman already mentioned that somebody from the business can only become the strategic advisor. And maybe if Anthony is listening, maybe the IIA needs to put a standard in place that when we are hiring, maybe now let's focus on accountants, but get somebody from the business if strategy is the key word. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to say thank you. I have two questions. I think anyone can answer these two questions. The first question, if you look to the chartered, it says that internal audit are full and free, and you need to have full access to all the informations. But if you go to the reality, it's conflicts with, we don't get all informations. So as a chief and chairman, what's your look on this scenario? My second question is, in your career, what is a strategic decision you made and you regret that? Thank you.
Not being a tennis player. Is your first question about getting the access to the information, correct?
Okay, your first question was about the access to the information. Now, by charter, you have all the access to the information, as you mentioned. In reality, there are delays and obstacles. I think this comes with having a dialogue. First of all, you need to give them clarity on what information you need. I have seen some audit requirements within my own team initially, or even from the best practice. There is a long list of requirements which the auditee will not know why do you need all this information. So yes, he will not gonna interfere in your scope, but some clarity on what information you need and by when. So that helps him in understanding and building the right logics for you. The second, which I mentioned earlier, is on the key data which you are auditing every year. You need to have the access. Now, if it doesn't work on all these, with your relationships, with the dialogues, then you need to exercise authority. So if you try to build a dialogue, relationship, explaining, still it doesn't come, then you need to go to the second level up to the CEO initially. And we have seen incidents where, for example, I need CEO's approval to certain information. So, but I think having a dialogue with the operational, general managers, or making them understand, it helps. Also planning your requirements, because sometimes we auditors are also, we come in Q4, where the management is really busy with targets, and we send our long list of requirements and tell them we need it in 2 days' time. So we also need to be reasonable, and I think one of the things we did is circulating our plans. Initially, some auditors, they had the views why should we tell them we are coming and all of this? But if you give them your plan a little bit earlier, at least they are ready in terms of information or on mindset that, okay, I have auditors coming, I need to buffer my time. This is from our side.
Yes. Any other question? Although answering your question, because repeatedly, if you are not getting, then it's also an issue of culture and trust. So you need to go deep into the issue itself sometime. And also there is one more thing, we need to also leverage on technology itself. Because now with the technology, you have you can have direct access to the data, and you should have a dialogue with your executive management and those who have already implemented, say, continuous auditing or monitoring platforms. So you can also consider this thing.
Farhan, let me say, to the question to access where when you're not granted, welcome to the real world. That's what it is. How can you change that positively? That's the challenge as a chief audit executive you must embrace in making sure. If it makes good business sense, and I want to know what the CEO's salary, for example, and I have a good case for it, you will have it. And that's how you look at it. Look into these obstacles which we all face in our life as chief audit executive. What does it mean? Reflect to the business and have the faith that you will get it and you shall have that access. Yeah, what do you regret? He asked a very tough, what did you regret in your career? It's a tough one, I didn't think of it. I wish I didn't. I wish I had a bit more time spending it going around the world where I'm going to these conferences, spending more time in the place rather than just in and out. So anybody who's a guest, make sure whenever you go somewhere, spend some time and enjoy the place you are in. That's something I really missed.
Any other question? This is a very tough topic, so if you have any doubts, I think you can come up. Okay, just final question from you. What are because nowadays in corporate worlds, we all start with KPIs. What are the performance indicators for a successful strategic advisor, be it a formal or informal? Do you have any, how do you measure your success as a strategic advisor?
It's maybe by adding value to the organization. As one of the slides says there by Ian, don't tell the board what they want to know, or what they know. They should tell them what they don't know. So adding value and bringing holistic view of the company by using the new technology, the data analytics and the AI, and giving the holistic view of the organization from terms of numbers, saving, cost optimization, looking at the holistic. This is what usually the board wants to see. This is a strategic value added. They don't want to see those compliance every day. This person did this, person did that, and this function was not able to give this and that. Those are already, sorry, with all respect, becoming boring for the boards. They've heard it all their life or their years. You want to tell them something to add value for the organization, for them to take a decision. You say, for example, 20% of your procurement is going for example, single source. 10% of your ICV is going this way. Your ERC cost is going this. You give percentage and you give a holistic view where they can take a decision and ask the CEO. And even this is for the board and even for the CEOs. This is where they like to see from the trusted partner or advisory.
For my mind, it's very clear. How many consultancy you've been asked by management? How many times the management came and requested your professional opinion? That's not to derail you from what you're trying to do in the organization. But people say 20-80. Why is not 50-80? If you are there as a strategic advisor to the organization, the more you get these relevant consultancy that they're asking for your opinion, that's a way you can measure yourself. If you've never been asked, that means they don't want to talk to you. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear panel members. No, please. Sorry.
Okay. I think adding to what Sheikh Abdurrahman and Abdul Qadir have mentioned, it's also when you're walking in the corridors, how many people also come to you for advice at personal level, where not personal, like they tell you what they have been doing in their work. They admit certain things that they have done, and they ask you for your advice. And the other one is also proactive. If the management comes to you not about what they have done, is what they want to do proactively, then that's another sign.
Sheikh, if you could please, remain for a bit. Thank you. Thank you, our esteemed panelists, and Farhan for moderating this valuable discussion. And before we move on, I just want to say, Sheikh Abdurrahman, thank you for everything. You showed how proud you are of us, and we're really happy to be under your leadership. We'd like you to kindly remain on stage to receive a token of appreciation for your contributions. Once again, thank you for this grateful session. It was very valuable and insightful. We'll have Mr. Ahmed Mahmoud joining us to the stage to present the tokens. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take a break now for lunch and prayer. Please enjoy your meal, and as Mr. Abdul Qadir said, please network around and see each other. We will reconvene at 1:45, inshallah. Thank you so much.